Okay, welcome every night. Oh, welcome every night. Here we go. Every night. Welcome everyone to our board meeting tonight. I'd like to call the meeting to order by announcing that the board convened an executive session to discuss proposed, pending, or current litigation, the employment, promotion, or demotion of a particular person or person, and collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, the Taylor Law. We would like to start our meeting by saying the pledge. If I could ask you to please stand, if you may. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Dr. Dolan, I'll turn it over to you if our students are here. Are students here?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. Thanks for coming. We have some students to honor tonight, and we front load that in the meeting in order for them to be honored quickly, but also I like to think that it's a statement about how important we think it is to honor students, and we have several to honor tonight. Most of them are here. If some are not, I'm going to read their names anyway, and I assure you we will get their certificates to them. 6 North Shore students were selected to perform at this year's 85th All-State Winter Conference held in Rochester, New York, December 2nd through the 5th. The annual festival, sponsored by the New York State School Music Association, NYSSMA, is considered one of the highest honors a school musician can attain. Over 6,500 students audition for All-State each year, and only 800 are accepted statewide. Students rehearse and perform with nationally recognized conductors. Congratulations, and I'm going to read these names, and after I'm all done with all the names, if all of these students who are here can come up, we have a certificate for you, and we'd like to get a picture of you as well. Congratulations to Ella Blumenthal, mixed chorus, Catherine DeTrano, symphony orchestra, Stephen Eder, symphonic band, Hana Ikawa, symphonic band, Michael McMahon, symphonic band, Matthew Rodriguez, symphonic band, and their music teachers, Mr. Bromsey and Mr. Catalano. Next, we have several of our IB diploma candidates with us here tonight. IB diploma candidates, and I'll read your names, and then please let me describe a little bit of what you've accomplished to the audience. IB candidates Atticus Bartlett, Ella Blumenthal, Catherine DeTrano, Alexander Eder, Alana Golden, Evelyn McCreary, Noah Fastula, and Michael Ricardo are being recognized for completing their International Baccalaureate Extended Essay, which is a 4,000-word independent research paper in a subject area of their choice. The extended essay prepares students for undergraduate research and gives them an opportunity to investigate a topic of personal interest to them. Through their research process, students develop skills in formulating a research question, engaging in personal exploration of the topic, communicating ideas, and developing an argument. Students are able to personalize the research process and incorporate tools for success in future experiences. Their research questions and subject areas are as follows. Catherine DeTrano, what is the effect of inorganic and organic fertilizer on the growth of Lolium Perrine? Hope I got that right. It's Latin. Looks like Lolium Perrine. Alana Golden, what caused the stigmatization of rap music in America from 1970 to 2000? Evelyn McCreary, to what extent is the rising trend of vaccine hesitancy in the 1990s through 2010 rooted in the invention and distribution of the smallpox vaccine in the United States? Noah Fistula, why is the 1972 World Chess Championship painted as a Cold War battle? Michael Ricardo, to what degree is blockchaining successful in protecting the rarity value of a given NFT? I believe those candidates are with us, but please allow me also to share with you the three who are not. Atticus Bartlett, to what extent should Zillow further diversify into the real estate market? Ella Blumenthal, how does Barnum use the mathematical concept of antifragility to implement aleatory into his compositions? And finally, Alexander Eder, how do medical advancements in the areas of organ transplants influence the cultural definition and responses to death? So incredible topics, and I think we'd all like to have a conversation with many of those students on what they studied. They'd probably do most of the talking. If Catherine, Alana, Evelyn, Noah, and Michael, I believe you're here, please come up. But wait, there's more. On January 6, 2022, the North Shore Schools proudly announced that Evelyn McCreary was among the top 300 scholars in the Regeneron Science Talents Research 2022, the nation's oldest and most prestigious science and math competition for high school seniors. Regeneron Science Talent Search provides students with a national stage to present original research and celebrates the hard work and discoveries of young scientists who are bringing a fresh perspective to significant global challenges. This year, research projects cover topics from tracking countries' progress on sustainable development goals to the impact of state individual COVID-19 responses, and improving the tools used to diagnose Alzheimer's to analyze the effects of virtual learning on education. Evie science research entitled Physiological Effects of PET Plastic Leaching and Polystyrene Microsphere Ingestion in Wild-Type Drosophila melanogaster, Evie would get it right faster, used the fruit fly as a model organism to determine the health effects of chemicals leached from plastic into food. She found that when the fruit flies consumed food with those leached chemicals, they had decreased agility. To help with her research, she worked with Dr. Theodore Brummel at Long Island University, LIU. Amid an unprecedented and ongoing global crisis, we are incredibly inspired to see such an extraordinary group of young leaders who are using the power of STEM to solve the world's most intractable challenges, said Maya Ajmera, President and CEO of Society for Science Publisher. Congratulations to Evie McCreary on this remarkable accomplishment, and many thanks also to her science research teacher, Dr. Molly Mordecai, and the North Shore Science Department, led by Mr. Stephen Minchell. Evie, could you come up again? And one more. Congratulations to Eli Wesley Jones. Eli Wesley Jones, a freshman at North Shore High School, for recently being selected by the New York Institute of Technology as a recipient of the 2022 5th Annual Mini Research Grant Award. Eli was selected from many strong applicants for his research project titled Numeracy and the Communication of Medical Risk. The proposal for which he won the grant is a continuation of his current project. In a letter addressed to Eli, the NYIT Grant Review Committee awarded him $300 for his research proposal and, quote, determined his submission to have scientific merit and potential impact in the STEM fields, including health. Eli intends to use the grant to extend and improve his research. On another note, good luck to Eli and Annette Park, who will be competing in round 2 of the Long Island Science and Engineering Fair. We hope to invite them back. Eli, come on up. Accepting the award for Mr. Wesley Jones, a very proud trustee, Trustee Jones. And we owe him a pen. I'm good.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Dolan. Usually always one of the best moments of all of our meetings. Tonight we have a couple, but that was certainly a special time to recognize the great work of those students who work on projects that we can't even pronounce the titles of. Pretty impressive. All right. I will move on to approval of the minutes from our February 3rd meeting. Is there a motion? And I hear a second as well. Is there any question or comments on these? All in favor of their approval? Aye. Thank you. Action 5, which is the approval of a treasurer's report from December of 2021. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And I heard a second also. Thank you. Questions or comments? All in favor of approval? Aye. Action 6, which is the approval of a budget transfer to cover legal fees for EPC, service provider contract, FOIL requests, and property issues. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Questions or comments on these? All in favor of transferring these funds? Aye. Thank you. That brings us to number 7, which is the report of our superintendent, Dr. Dolan.
Thank you. Before I begin, are our SGO representatives here tonight? Because last time I stole your thunder when I did a sports report. Are you doing a sports report tonight? Okay. Well, fortuitously, I may have one. Let's see. Good evening and welcome again to our board meeting. I thank everyone for being here, and I thank those of you who are watching for tuning in. Later tonight, we will continue our conversation about the proposed budget, but for now, I have a few other items I'd like to talk about. I'd like to lead off tonight with kudos to several athletic teams that have enjoyed historic success this winter. Our men's basketball team enjoyed outstanding success this year, culminating in their first playoff appearance in several years last night, and first conference championship in 3 decades. I'm going to gloss over the results of last night's playoff game and choose instead to congratulate the entire team on a great season. I also witnessed last night a level of school spirit and student support that was absolutely affirming. A young man on our team, Lucas Shimsky, happens to be a freshman, and with each of his 3-pointers, the student crowd erupted in a cheer of, "He's our freshman." How wonderful to hear students support one of their own in that way. It was very exciting. Our women's hoop squad also won their county conference and begin their playoff journey this weekend. Best of luck to them. Our wrestlers also won their conference championship, and our men's and women's track and field teams continued their dominance. For the women's team, they netted their 15th conference championship in the last 18 years. Finally, cheering them on, symbolically, were our cheerleaders, although they did so from afar, as they participated in the Florida National Cheerleading Competition in Florida last weekend. I was in constant contact with their coach, Kerry Langvale, and got several photos of our squad at Universal and Disney taking part in the competition. I am advised that they did extremely well and failed to advance by 1.2 points in their overall score, the slimmest of margins. Congratulations to the entire squad. Successful athletic programs do not just happen, and I commend our talented coaching staff, trainers, and our athletic director, Don Lang, for his organizational efforts, and I also thank Mr. Lang's supervisor, Marjorie Anderson. CASA, I'd like to thank the Coalition Against Substance Abuse for sponsoring a very informative program on fentanyl education earlier this week. The panel included several experts, including our own Director of Counseling, Dan Doherty, informing parents of the extreme dangers associated with this dangerous substance. Thank you to CASA, their leadership, Allison Camardella and Kevin McGilloway, and I believe that the presentation was taped and will be made available. So if you weren't able to see it, you will be able to, and we will get it on our website. Parent-teacher conferences. Our elementary parent-teacher conferences are scheduled for Thursday, March 10th and Friday, March 11th. I'm very pleased to report that they will be live, as we all feel comfortable moving forward in that direction. I would also like to thank the Federation, the group that represents our teachers, for working with me on this project and moving this initiative forward. Their partnership in this and other items is notable and appreciated. On or about March 7th, I will send a letter to the community with some thoughts on how we can all make these important meetings as productive as they are designed to be. I plan to be wandering the buildings those days and nights, as I want to do, and I look forward to joining with others in welcoming parents back into our buildings for these vital conversations about their children and our students. We are all carefully watching the COVID news, and the fact is that much of it is good. Transmission rates are lower, we are reporting fewer cases in our schools, and the very dark days of January have passed. I think we are all looking forward to spring with hope. I know that I am. There's every reason to believe that the governor will review the mask mandate that she imposed last summer, and should that occur, I want the community to know ahead of time what the district's plan will be, and I'm pleased to spell that out tonight. I will also post the plan by way of a letter to the community on the district website on March 1st. My letter will include the following modifications as we move forward. That the district will suspend our district-imposed mask mandate when the governor lifts hers. By suspending ours, it would allow us to revert to our own mask mandate in the event that a number of cases exploded or some other circumstance required us to. That we recognize that the governor's decision is data-driven, that we rely on data as we move forward also. That when both mandates are lifted, that we adopt a mask-optional approach that will allow students and adults to choose whether to wear a protective mask or not. That we will continue social distancing as we have this year whenever possible. That we will explain to parents who are concerned about their child's safety in a mask-optional environment ways that their child can continue to be protected, including recommendations on masks and continued efforts at enhanced hygiene. We will post specific information on the types of masks that can be worn to offer the best protection and where those masks might be available. That we recognize that it is now more important than ever for individuals to monitor their own health and stay home if they are sick for any reason. That we recognize that in the event the mandate is lifted by the governor or a court action after the school day begins, that we will continue the district mandate for the rest of that school day and adopt an optional approach when school opens the next day. Clearly, that's to avoid the confusion that took place on January 25th. That we will follow the medical guidelines offered us by our district physician, nursing staff, and New York State Department of Health, and that this could result in some increased isolation quarantine procedures because those without a mask are subject to different rules. It is my hope that there will be more explicit guidance soon that will help us navigate this course. That parents will instruct their child on whether they are to wear a mask or not, with the understanding that teachers in the classroom cannot monitor on a moment-to-moment basis. We will remind children who come to school wearing a mask that this was how they arrived. That we will continue to make test kits available for home use. Our distribution procedures will continue until we exhaust our supply, and should anyone want a test kit tonight, they are here and available at the high school, outside at the security desk, and I have confirmed that we have enough that if anybody wants one, please avail yourself of them. They can also be picked up at our elementary schools from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock every day at the security desk, at the middle school from 3:30 until 8 o'clock, and at the high school from 3 o'clock until 11 o'clock every night. That we monitor transmission rates carefully to continue to keep windows open and revert to outdoor education as fully as possible as soon as we are able. That there will be an expectation of civility in all interactions. Mask bullying in either direction will not be accepted, and educational efforts will be made to eliminate it. That we will report data to the community as it becomes available to us, particularly if we see an increase in transmission or positive testing. That we maximize our efforts to improve ventilation, including the purchase of additional filters has already begun. And finally, that the requirement for masks on buses being federally driven remains in effect until otherwise announced. Buses have a federal regulation that requires students to wear a mask on buses, which is why, for example, we still have to wear them on airplanes also. Once that is lifted, we will make that mask optional as well. I will also try to find a way in my letter to acknowledge the chasm that exists within the district, on Long Island, in the state, and in the nation on various points of view regarding masks and our approach to COVID. I hope that we can move forward together on this topic here and recognize that the district has consistently followed the law, but as the law changes, that we're able to develop solutions that meet our local needs. Again, all of that will be put in writing and will be posted on March the 1st. We believe that will be sufficient time, as we have every reason to believe that the governor will not be lifting her mandate until at least the middle of that week. So that will be posted. While we're talking about COVID, I would also like to advise the community that I'll be posting a letter tomorrow morning describing our continued efforts at contact tracing. While we are not obligated by law to do so, we do feel a moral obligation to continue to alert parents when their child tests positive and to work with them on quarantine and isolation protocols. I thank our nurses and principals for having completed this task for the last 20 months or so, but now we'd like to turn the task over to an outside agency, Horizon Healthcare. 2 individuals, one at the elementary level, one at the secondary level, will become the points of contact, and an email address for each will be provided. They will be available over the February break to work with parents and will continue their service when we return. At the elementary level, this program will be effective tomorrow, and at the secondary level, we will begin on March the 1st. Much more detail will be provided in tomorrow's communication. Finally, I do want to wish everyone a pleasant and productive February break. I'd also like to remind everyone that we are not entirely out of the pandemic woods yet. Everyone's careful attention to caring for yourself and others is the best way to ensure that we return to a healthy environment in our schools. The district also has some special plans for February break, and to share those with you, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Zublionis, who has spearheaded an initiative. Dr. Z?
Thank you, Dr. Dolan. And in a symbolic gesture, we recognize that we are near the 2-year point of the initial start of the pandemic, believe it or not. And many of us, our faculty, our parents, and our students are tired. And we are urging our faculty and our students to take what we're calling a true winter week away. It's kind of a symbolic gesture. And I'm looking at some of the students in this room, and I know that they might have trouble with that. Taking a true break might actually cause more stress for them. But we really do want to urge our faculty and our staff to do less written work, to really take a break and pace yourselves for the marathon that is ahead. So thank you.
Thank you. That's your report? Certainly was full enough. Thank you, Dr. Dolan. There's a lot in there. I think the community will certainly be looking forward to seeing the written version of that on March 1, because it is chock full of details that are going to be important for us as we move forward, and obviously with that shared goal of starting to put these regulations behind us and continuing this return to normal that we're all seeking. Line 8 of the agenda tonight is going to be an update on the superintendent search, which I will give, and it will be brief. The search is now closed. We have had a plethora of applicants. Our consultant firm, School Leadership, will be pre-interviewing the selected applicants and then presenting their semifinalists to the board early to mid-March. And the board is scheduled for that meeting to review and then begin our part in this process. We thank the community, of course, for helping us build the profile. And I spoke with the search consultants recently, and they said that the meetings they had with the people from the community, the surveys and the feedback were instrumental in putting together the ad and then helping them sort through the pool of applicants. So I think that's going to be a win for the district. We will move on to line 9. Betty? Sorry, I'm just noticing, are you looking at the electronic version? 9A looks like it should be part of the personnel. That's posted. Should I make an official motion to move that to the increment? Okay. No, it's fine. It's certainly a logistical thing. The board will approve it as always. I thought Noah and Katie were just gonna take over. No. All right. With that, I will ask Noah and Katie to come up and tell us what else is going on at our school. Thank you both. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We have a bit of a shorter report tonight as things begin to wind down in anticipation of the February break. But beforehand, I would like to congratulate the IB diploma candidates, Evie McCreary, and the All-State musicians for their amazing accomplishments. I am so proud to be among so many amazing classmates to work with every day. In celebration of Valentine's Day earlier this week, the GSA put together a Candygram event where students had the opportunity to purchase boxes of candy for a friend to receive on Valentine's Day. In addition, our mock trial team is advancing to the intermediate round of the county tournament. Good luck to them.
In addition, we would like to recognize a few exciting firsts in our school. In addition to our cheerleading team who competed at nationals in Florida last week for the first time in school history, we've also been informed that the North Shore Chess Club has advanced to the Nassau County Chess League playoffs, which is another school first, so best of luck to them in that competition. And finally, high school Latin students are preparing to depart for Rome on Saturday. We wish them safe travels and hope they have an incredible time and a great cultural experience. On behalf of all the students, we feel like it's such a privilege to be part of a district that provides us with so many unique and amazing opportunities like this. We hope you all have a wonderful February break and safe travels to everyone. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you both. Great job as always. And we appreciate, of course, your contribution, and certainly you're free to move on with your evening, as are all of our students. Although, of course, you're all welcome to stay as well. Okay, thank you both. We will now move on to action or line item 10, which is our regular business, and that's going to be our continuing budget review. I wanted to point out that for this, the board took a lot of steps this year with our new platform, Board Docs, to increase the transparency and make it easier for everyone to follow along, whether you're following at home or whether you're here. And I did want to thank Betty Campy for actually doing the logistics of that, where for each section that we'll be discussing tonight, you can click on a hyperlink within the budget section that's posted, and you can look at pretty much the same thing that we're looking at. So you can follow along and see the dollars and cents. It is, I'm going to finish this and then I will hand it over to you before we start. My introduction hopefully doesn't step on what you have to say. This is our budget review session 2 of 3, with number 3 on March 3rd. So that's number 3 on 3-3. I think that could be a good mnemonic for us to remember. We'll all be taking our breaks without any studying or learning, but just experiencing life, Chris. But if we could all remember, March 3 is our final session before we adopt the final version on March 24th, at which point it becomes the board's budget to be voted on by the community. So I want to thank everyone here tonight for tuning in for this factual information about what we're doing and how the district invests in our community for the children and, of course, for their future. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Dolan before we get to it.
I do have some slides, and if the board wants to find a seat here, you'll be able to see them, although I think we gave you a copy, so it's entirely up to you. Oh, here come the copy, so it's up to you. If you want to stay where you are, you'll be able to see them. And let me apologize to the community. I'm sorry I'm talking so much tonight. This will be the last extended presentation I'll do tonight anyway, so especially the people who I work with all day long who have to listen to me all the time. I do want to start tonight off by repeating myself just a little bit about some things that I said at our last meeting. I want to remind the community that the building of this budget is an entirely iterative process. It is a conversation. Walter Lippmann said that democracy is a conversation, and this budget process is both democratic and indicative of a conversation between the people in the community who certainly have a vested interest in their tax dollars and our schools, and a Board of Education that will hear our recommendations and act on them at the end of March. For now, it is a proposed budget, and Olivia and I are responsible for it. We accept that responsibility. We invite questions. We love getting questions. If a community member has a question about even a line item in the budget, please call us. If you see something that you're not certain is correct, please call us. We would really appreciate that. Let us know. And I think that both Olivia and I are pretty well known for our responsiveness, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because in this conversation it is vital that the community feel that it plays a role, so that when we're all done, the goal is to have a complete a budget that everybody can agree upon and that we have all built consensus around. So with that, I'm going to show a couple of slides that those of you who were with us 2 weeks ago tonight saw before, but I think they're important data if you weren't here before. Starting off with just a glance budget and tax levy. You can see there's some raw data. Our budget for 21-22, approximately $111 million. Our proposed budget for this year going up by $4.3 million, or 3.872%. But not all of that is raised in the community. Not all of that is in the tax levy. The tax levy is that portion of the revenue side of the budget that comes from us collecting taxes. Because we have other sources of revenue that I detailed at the last meeting, in fact, our tax levy increase is not 3.872, but rather 2.499. It is that tax levy increase, which I think everybody knows by now is subject to the infamous 2% tax cap, which is not 2%. It varies from year to year, as you'll see in just a minute, with a number of variables that determine what each individual district's tax cap might be. The levy itself is distributed differently depending on various classes of properties in the district. Class 1 single-family homes make up the bulk of where we collect the tax levy from, but co-ops and condos, Class 2, utilities, Class 3, Class 4, business and commercial. And I think this slide is particularly important to the North Shore School District because of the LIPA property that still exists and that we collect taxes on in our community. I do want to draw, again, everybody's attention to the shift that took place even this year, where Class 3 utilities went from contributing 20% of the tax levy down to 17.7, about a 2.5% drop. And take a look there at Class 1, where you will see that because Class 1 is the group that contributes the most to the tax levy, that's where most of the increase was as well, going up from 72.556 to 74.436. Our proposed tax levy relies upon those numbers again. We don't know if they will change or not. However, it is the last asterisk on this page, and it appears several times in our budget document. Both the tax levy and class share of the levy are contingent upon a settlement, no settlement being arrived at with LIPA before this budget is approved. And what I refer to, I'm sure everybody in North Shore knows, and again, I said this the last time, please forgive me for being redundant. I've only been here several months. I'm already sick of talking about LIPA. I know the community is sick of hearing about it, but it certainly is an impact on our budget, not knowing whether or not that property will remain on the tax rolls. So here's some history where our budget has been in the past. And that bottom line in blue shows what the tax levy has been. There you will see that it automatically disputes that concept that the 2% tax cap is a finite 2%. Ours has varied from 1.89 several years ago, as high as 3.034 in 2021, a low of 1.434 last year, and then this year, 2.499, which is within the tax cap and what is our recommended total tax levy at this point. And an important slide, what is the impact on people's homes? You will see there the home value across the top. It indicates all the way down at the bottom the approximate amount that taxes would go up, the proposed amount ranging from $243 per year all the way to $730 per year, depending on the value of the house. But two variables that play a role in that we have no control over are those base proportions that I pointed to before that determine the percentage that the four classes of properties pay, and also the assessment value of your home, which is up to the county. Those are out of our control and certainly do influence it, which is why in September and October we do get phone calls with people very appropriately asking, the tax levy increase was 1.43%. Why did my taxes go up 5%? And the answer is the base proportion may have changed, your assessed value may have changed, and we'll talk more at the next meeting also about tax rates, which certainly have a variable effect. So these are the newer slides because of all the topics we talked about 2 weeks ago, the one that we've heard the most questions about are about our proposal for electric buses. We hear questions, we owe you an answer. And I think in tonight's proposal, you'll see a lot of those questions being answered. For those of you that hadn't heard before, we are proposing a switch over to some electric buses. 6 electric vehicles, which would also require a charging station. Right now, they are all in our budget. And the reason that we think it's appropriate to do that is because of some unique circumstances that may not be true in the future. The district is located near a disadvantaged community, and according to our grant specialist, any bus route that touches any part of that community could qualify for up to $200,000 per bus in grant funding. Some of the district's buses are routed through the roads in these communities, and the area in green are those communities in question. There you see all of them across Nassau County, and it is kind of interesting, you know, way up there in the upper left-hand corner, the northwest corner, we're kind of unique among all of our neighbors. There have been some changes in law. Some people have asked whether or not our proposal is based entirely upon conjecture, and it is not. On September 8th, 2021, the governor signed a bill into law requiring that all passenger vehicles sold in New York State be emission-free by 2035. That's quite a way away, 2022 to 2035, 13 years away, but it is a strong indication of what the state government is trying to achieve. And further, the 2022 New York State executive budget includes a proposal that all newly purchased school buses be zero emission by 2027, 5 years from now, and that all school buses on the road be zero emission by 2035. We're proposing a lease for these buses and a purchase of the infrastructure. We propose to swap up to 6 large diesel buses for electric school buses. We're working with a consultant, McBride Consulting, to write grants for us. They have secured funding to swap out those 6 diesel buses for electric vehicles. A new electric bus is estimated to cost a new electric school bus is estimated to cost $150,000 after incentives. The district could receive up to $200,000 in grant incentive due to its location. About $120,000 is budgeted to purchase new buses every year. And I have a chart on this, which will make this a little more clear in just a minute. We also need to upgrade the electric service at the bus depot, and that's the charging station that we've spoken about. We need to upgrade electrical service to 480 volts, install charging stations, and add extra conduits for future expansion. It is estimated that the electric upgrade and charging stations will cost $603,000. This is a 2-year project. Only half of that project is in this year's budget. The 2022-23 budget includes $350,000 for the infrastructure upgrade. All incentives received will be used to offset the installation costs, and we are still in the process of collecting those. So the charging station, $603,000. We are very lucky that we've already received a commitment from Assemblyman Levine for $150,000. Within 24 hours of our presentation to him, he assured us of that funding. In our budget, there's $350,000, which means that right now we are $103,000 short of fully funding the electric charging station. That includes conduits for additional charges at a future date. And as it says there, we've received a commitment letter. And also, I thank New York State Assemblyman Montesano, who sent a letter to the governor to request full funding for the charging stations. A very eloquent letter that was sent again almost immediately after we presented our proposal to him. So here's the apples to apples that many people have asked for. A diesel bus costs $120,000. Normally, we do replace 1 large bus or 2 small vans every year in line with the district's bus replacement schedule. While I'm on that side of the slide, let me answer another question we were asked. Because we do also rely on small vans, are there electric small vans? And the answer is no. Right now there are not, but they are in production. They don't exist to purchase now, but we are told that they will be soon. An electric bus is $350,000 compared to $120,000. We're receiving a grant for each bus of $200,000. Net cost, $150,000. That includes an 8-year battery warranty at no additional cost. We've received a lot of questions. And it has been so helpful to get these questions now. You know, what about the battery? The extended warranty can be purchased for 4 more years at a current price of $14,000. That is not in the budget, but it would be available to us. A net difference between the diesel bus at $120,000, for which there are no incentives, for which there are no subsidies, versus an electric bus at $150,000, the difference is $30,000. How much does it cost to run them? Diesel fuel costs, I won't go through all those calculations. I'm going to skip the top one because I don't know when we're going to see $2.60 gas again. So let's just go to the blue. And even that one's kind of optimistic. $3.12 a gallon. This is an embarrassing part of it, 6 miles per gallon, but that's a school bus, times 20 gallons, 120 miles. Feel like I'm back in algebra class. 20 gallons, $64.20, $62.40 a day. A yearly cost of $11,232 for one diesel bus. An electric bus charging cost. You can see it there. We have factored it out based on the kilowatt hour that is in play right now. Full charge, $24.86 a day. A yearly cost of $4,474, about a $6,000 difference. Maintenance, ongoing maintenance. You will see there what it costs to keep a bus on the road. And it's about $2,000, $1,922 a year to keep it on the road. The ongoing maintenance for an electric bus is minimal. There are very few moving parts under the hood. We've looked under the hood, and the hood is remarkably clean. The brakes and tires have a regenerative braking system, which actually makes the brakes last longer the more you use them. And we do also collect revenues. That is, we have a bus garage, and we utilize our bus garage to service other school districts. 3 of them are listed right there. You will see a historical of how much we have collected, and we would anticipate that as diesel buses are retired, and as other districts move to electric vehicles, that they're going to require maintenance. We are in a position to provide that maintenance, and our mechanics, in fact, will be trained by the company for free. We'll be able to maintain other district buses and probably, hopefully, increase that total amount that we collect in revenue because we have our own bus garage. The only reason East Williston is listed as a 0 is because we have not collected from them yet this year. Not the last one? Okay. I hope those answer some of the questions about electric buses. And for those of you that did submit questions, whether it was at a PTO meeting or at the community budget forum or any other forum, please keep the questions coming. We need your questions to know what information you need to evaluate our proposal. So keep the questions coming, and we will provide answers, I promise you. If not in this forum, I know Olivia and I get on the phone and call people and tell you individually, but I also think this is very important to do it with a large group so that everyone is aware of it. We're going to turn now to a page-by-page or a line-by-line look at the budget, and I would invite the board to come on back up, and I'll turn it back over to President Ludmar.
Tom, can we ask follow-up questions on the diesel bus?
This now? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
Marianne, let's just all find our seats, and then we'll do that for sure.
Yeah, you know what? I'll answer from over there.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't want us to miss the opportunity, the board to miss the opportunity. They had some questions.
Okay, Marianne, to your point, questions specifically on the slides before we move over to the line-by-line evaluation of the budget. Take it away.
Okay, so the slide says we are going to lease the electric buses for 10 years. We own the diesel buses, correct?
Yes,
We own them. Okay, so how long generally, I know we have a replacement schedule. How
Yes.
long generally do we keep a diesel bus in service?
12 to 15 years.
All right, so in 10 years though, we will have to we'll have to get a new lease on the electric bus.
Oh no, we are checking a lease with the auction to pass it.
Okay, because the way it's proposed now, it's a lease, right?
Yes,
So,
but a lease with the auction to pass it.
but the battery life is,
Olivia, if you could just get a little closer to the mic. Yeah,
The
thank you.
battery life is about 8 years.
Each individual can raise the volume, but the trustees and everyone speaking, if you just go directly into the mic and point it directly at you like I'm doing, you can hear me, so. Sure, it's being videoed, yeah. I mean, it's all being live streamed for the public. And I appreciate what you're saying, but they're all speaking into the mic, so it's live recorded. You can go on, Marianne.
okay, sorry, I can't believe someone can't hear me. That is such a first. So, we own the diesel buses. We generally keep them 12 to 15 years in service. We have a warranty for 8 years on the buses, on the batteries. We're leasing them for 10. We're looking into an option to purchase. What is the average battery life? The warranty is 8 years, but can the battery life exceed the warranty, especially if we're looking to purchase the lease bus? Do we know?
Yes. The first 8 years, the warranty is included in the purchase of the bus. We can purchase extended warranty
Okay.
for $14,000 each on each bus.
Okay. So that would, if we kept the
But
if
this
we
is
were,
today's prices. It could change because the market is changing so rapidly.
right, but we could have that potential to extend the warranty.
Yes.
That's right. So we could actually keep the lease bus in service longer.
Yes.
But do we?
After we pay for it. It depends on how we structure the lease. We can structure the lease and pay it off in 5 years, and the rest of the time it's ours.
So we haven't really figured out the details about how we're going to purchase it right now.
Oh,
Based
listen.
upon the materials we got previously, we were looking at a 10-year lease, and the $350,000 cost is based upon a 10-year lease, less the $200,000 grant, which gives you $150,000, but that number could potentially be less because if you pay it off sooner, I assume you don't pay the interest payments.
Yes.
Okay, so it might actually be less than the $150,000.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the trustees about the slides specifically?
I have a question about the electric buses.
Sure.
It wasn't on the slide this week, but I know we spoke about it 2 weeks ago, and I was just hoping maybe you could further elaborate on it because I thought maybe the point got lost in the video. Tom, can you speak, or maybe Olivia, can you speak a little bit about the benefits in terms of student safety regarding the electric buses compared to the diesel buses?
That has to do with the emission. And if you watch the video very carefully, this is one of the things that came from one of our drivers. Because the electric vehicles have a tendency to move a little quicker than the diesel buses, the driver did mention that we all know some people like to cross school buses. Because the pickup is just as fast as a regular car, it helps with the safety of the bus. That was one of the things that one of the drivers that we spoke with emphasized, that the takeoff is much smoother. Because of that, it is much safer to drive them. Apart from the emission, that was one thing that I found to be incredible about the electric school buses, because it drives smoother than the regular diesel bus.
And so, Olivia, I don't know if you can elaborate on this too. It's my understanding that the quiet nature of the school bus makes it also easier for the bus driver to sort of monitor what's going on inside of the bus.
Correct. It's one of, this is one testimony from one of our own drivers, as a matter of fact. Yes, it's so quiet, and when those of us who rode it, it's so quiet that you can hear every noise that is going on behind you. The driver is able to hear whatever is going on. And we've seen cases where kids are fighting at the back of the bus. In this case, the driver can hear every little thing that is happening. The only other piece that I'll add to what you just said is, because it's so quiet, what some of the new companies are doing is that they have to put something in front to make noise, because when cars are approaching, it's so quiet that they don't even know it is coming. So everything is improving, but inside the bus itself, it is so quiet that you can hear a pin drop.
Thank you, Olivia. It's so interesting because you think of electric buses, you think cost savings, you think good for the environment, and it's very interesting that there are all these benefits towards student safety in terms of safety driving. I'm assuming that there's going to be a decrease in behavioral issues on the bus. So thank you.
Other questions from trustees?
And I know
Yes, sir.
Olivia mentioned, but I don't want to gloss over it. Of course, there's the fact that there are no emissions, which for students with any kind of an asthma or breathing condition, and faculty and bus drivers as well. I don't want to gloss over that one. That's one of the biggest health advantages of the electric buses.
We're on questions about the slides, but I guess I do want to focus on bus questions because I have a non-bus question. Please, Marianne.
So we're basing the numbers on the grants. We've entered into a contract with McBride. What happens if we don't get the grant money? How do we proceed? Because we don't have the money in the budget. The money we have in the budget is based upon getting grant money, and we have budgeted for the charging station, so we're not dependent on getting the grant money on the charging stations. But what happens if we don't get the grant money for the buses?
I think the trend, yes, it is very likely that we will get it because of our location, but because it is now going to be part of the state aid formula, we can also get funding through the regular state aid, because if the state takes it over and builds it as an incentive and bakes it into the state aid formula, we will also get state aid. But because the state aid formula is not out yet, that's why we didn't reflect it on the slide.
Thank you.
Yep, Trustee McCary?
Fine. So, Olivia, do you anticipate, since we're sort of like out early with the electric buses, do you anticipate if we did this later on, right, years later, there would be more competition toward getting this kind of outside funding?
Yes, that's exactly why we have to go out a little early than most other institutions, because when it becomes baked into the state aid formula, it depends on the wealth ratio of the school district. Every school district has a state aid ratio, and the higher the property wealth, the lower your state aid ratio. So a school district, Hampstead will get more state aid than we will. So it's advantageous because this is a grant funding and we don't know how long that will last. That's why it's a good idea for us to go for that money before it is baked into the state aid formula.
Okay. We're very linear tonight, so it's hard to see what my other trustees are doing. My question, Tom, was about the base proportions that you mentioned. You mentioned when you presented the slides last week that there was that shift from the 20.7 to 20.07 to 17.7, and we were trying to look into that because, of course, that's given to us by the Office of Real Property in Nassau County. Do we have any further clarity on that?
We do not. We have foiled the information from the county because we'd like to know why approximately $1.8 million went missing from that utility line. We have foiled it. We've also asked our lobbyists to work on it. But no, we do not have a definitive answer. We think that it is a water property that was sold to the village of Seacliff and as a result went off the tax rolls. But no, we do not have a confirmation of that.
Okay, so in other words, speculatively, if a property leaves ownership of a privately controlled entity such as the water company, and is then becomes part of the domain of a municipality or a public domain, that is an example of when it can be removed from the tax roll, and that the 1% cap on the shift can be broken, and that's why we saw the 2+% go into the residential taxpayers.
Correct. The only time that can happen is when an item comes completely off the tax roll by way of condemnation or sale.
Sorry, just point it right.
The only way that can happen is when a property comes completely off the tax rolls, for example, by way of condemnation or sale.
Okay, so we'll wait for confirmation on that, but
We are working on it.
seems likely. Okay, trustees, other questions on the slides before we move over to the line-by-line review? Okay, and of course I say trustees, but everyone is following along at home, I hope. We will move on to page 18 of our budget review. And what I'd like to do tonight is just give a little bit of a headliner for what we've done. Olivia's been doing this a very long time, but she does not get tired of innovating. And this year we have the blue blurbs, as we're calling them, although I highlighted mine in yellow, so now it's green. But to introduce each section, which I would like to read so folks can understand what it is that we're doing here. The first section we're going to go over tonight is regular instruction, which is the largest section of the budget and covers the cost of direct instruction and instructional support for the majority of North Shore students. It maintains all core instructional programs and ensures that all North Shore students continue to receive an excellent education. It includes the salaries of regular classroom teachers, substitute teachers, monitors, recreation supervisors, curriculum and development work, contractual costs, equipment, supplies, and textbooks. It also includes one full-time equivalent classroom teacher for enrollment growth, potential enrollment growth, and 0.4 full-time teacher equivalent theater teacher at the North Shore Middle School and High School. So I will ask trustees to go through this. We won't go through every line unless you want to, of course, but starting on page 18, which deals with salaries, staff development, monitors, etc. Any questions on page 18 for my trustees?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so this question, had something about selecting languages, a non-budget related issue at the middle school. So one of the questions I have had is, have we looked at if there would be any efficiencies achieved down the road in consolidating languages? I mean, I would hate to see any languages go and maybe the same number of students, so it wouldn't make a difference. But I'm wondering if we looked at that, because if that were someplace where we'd achieve efficiencies later on, you really need to begin that process now, because students are picking in 6th grade and they can't just shift midstream.
I'd be happy to try to answer it, if you'll allow me, somewhat anecdotally. I'm advised that a few years ago there was a proposal to eliminate a foreign language in the district, and that the community met that with great disdain. That the idea of, I believe it was Italian, eliminating Italian, was not received well. We have not looked at it again. It would conceivably save a little bit of money, but as you said, Trustee Russo, same number of students would still be in the same number of classes. Classes might be a little bit bigger. We haven't looked at that. We could certainly experiment with it and see what that would look like, but based on past experience, that was not something that we thought would be well received.
Well, Italian was a completely different animal. It had the second largest enrollment in the district. So I don't know that you would have the same reception if you were consolidating elsewhere. But it might be just an idea to consider. And, we keep talking about LIPA, but we don't really talk about solutions down the road as to where we might achieve some efficiencies. And I think that we have an obligation to look at different avenues. I mean, one of the lower enrollment courses is Latin. Both my kids took Latin. I would hate to see anything happen to Latin, but the reality is that we're in, we may be in a very different financial position a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And I think we have an obligation, popular or not, to look at whatever places we might achieve economies of scale.
Dr. Z and I will take a look at it and come up with some data for the board.
All right, thank you. I want to ask other questions before I do this. I regret that I have to remind everyone that we are under a state mask mandate, and I try to look at what I'm doing here, but there are a lot of folks in this room right now who are not wearing their masks. I would appreciate it just until we are free of that, that we would follow the regulations, please. I will ask other folks for comments or questions on page 18.
President,
Yep, please.
on page 18, in the middle of the page, the staff development line, the line for this year versus last is holding steady, but it's significantly lower than it's been historically. and I wanted to see if there was any discussion from either Tom or Chris about the reasoning there.
One of the major differences that we see between this year relative to last year is because of the tremendous amount of staff development that we needed in the hybrid year that we had last year, and some of the educational technology that we were using, and some of the other needs that arose. In projecting costs for training, we have done so much professional development over the last 2 years. That code is used for both curriculum development and professional learning. We shift between an emphasis on one or the other. I think this year, going forward, we'll emphasize more curriculum development, and I think there's a cost savings, when we do that.
Thank you.
One other thing too, I'm sorry, is title grant money. I've looked to find efficiencies in how we can use title grant money to support professional learning as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a similar comment that I saw the way that that has gone up and down, and certainly during the pandemic, obviously with learning entire new modes of presentation of curriculum and relation to students, certainly live or in person or some hybrid models, et cetera, that makes sense. But I did want to reinforce, even though that's a very good answer, and I appreciate it, Chris, there were some conversations about PD during the questions that came up in the APIB discussion that I felt didn't really give full shrift to the value of PD. And so I just wanted to reinforce that from my perspective as a trustee, we have a tremendously advanced faculty. If you look at where they are in their lanes, they're very far, and they're very advanced in their own personal studies. And of course, we do support quite a bit of professional development, but it's just a very important priority that I think we should continue to highlight. So I wanted to add that. Other questions on page 18?
I just want to follow up on the PD one.
Sure.
So is some of the reduction due to we do less PD with Columbia's teachers workshop, because we've trained our teachers, and we also have trained teachers within our faculty to do some of the training in-house? Does that account for some of this historical decline in PD?
It does, and that does is it opens up the use of those title funds for some of those other expenditures. I think turnkeying, the other thing is that professional learning is delivered often virtually now, much less expensive as well.
Okay, if we turn to page 19, this is additional regular instruction lines, recreation supervisors, aides, equipment. Any questions on this page? I had one that I'd like to lead off or potentially be the only one. In the fourth section from the bottom, middle school drug, alcohol, and wellness speakers, there's a budget line for $3,000. That seems potentially a hair light, given that critical age and those students, and the opportunities we have to do intervention at that. CASA's been a great partner, as you had mentioned earlier in the evening, with a tremendous fentanyl presentation right here in this room. I'm not saying we necessarily have to budget more right now, but if the opportunity comes up to either partner with CASA or reach out, I would hope that would be an area. And I wasn't sure if there's a corresponding line at the high school. I couldn't find it. I don't need an answer right now. I don't know, Olivia, if you know where that is, or if it's baked into, yeah.
It's baked into Dr.
I'm sorry, Olivia, just
it's baked into Dr. Z's budget code, which is in on page 13. That's where Dr. Z is, he does the ruler training and that kind of. Dr. Z, can you talk about the Coalition for Drug-Free North Shore that we moved from the 7,000 code into your budget?
Yes, and actually in two places. So in the area that Olivia is referencing, that's funding for training for consultants who perform professional development or services directly for students. but also in the counseling code, money allocated for LICAD and presentations, and they've been a partner with us. Sometimes CASA supports that, but we're working through what they call a student assistance program, which offers those exact supports for students.
Terrific. Thank you both. Other questions on page 19?
On the drug and alcohol training, I would just remind you that the PTOs have in the past been very helpful prior to CASA and I think since CASA as well in getting and paying for speakers, and that is a line that can be supplemented by our parent organizations who we're incredibly grateful for everything they do, especially in bringing speakers in on these type of topics.
I agree. It really highlights, Marianne, as you and I both know, that it is the schools have a role in this, but it is a community issue. And the degree to which the schools and the parents and the community as a whole can partner on this is critical towards moving toward a de minimis on this. Other questions on page 19? Page 20? I'm going to try to move somewhat fast, so I'll not look up and wait for someone to shout at me.
I just have a quick one.
Oh, please, Chris. Rich.
In 2110-490, the last entry, should that be 2023 instead of 22?
The tri-state visitation? That's in the fourth section down on page 20.
I think Rich is right.
All right, 23.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Great. Other questions? Page 21. Is there other expenses, mandated expenses? Page 22.
I have,
Vice President Jones?
yeah, a couple of things. But first, one thing is on page 22 with the elementary school program supplies. Was really striking to me, and I just wanted to say thank you for that incredibly detailed breakdown that we got of how that money is being spent, like from the cost of foundations to art supplies to the classroom rugs. It's incredibly specific and detailed and helpful in that regard. And the other piece on this page, I think, is it's so heartening to see the field trip funding back. Right? It is a very tiny budget line, but it is so important to what we do that I'm really just thrilled to see that back. So thank you.
Yeah, here. The idea of having those field trips and the educational experience gives those kids, but also the recognition that we can do them again, fantastic. Page 23, additional supplies.
I have something
Oh,
there
go for
I
it.
wanted to point out too. The music department, right? It's very impressive to me that the music department is doing such an impressive job of maintaining the value of our inventory of our musical instruments. Like we've long had a policy of doing a very good job of replacing computers, for example, on a regular basis, and to see the way the district is working to identify sort of the inventories of value across the district, including the musical instruments that we need, say, large percussion instruments, right, basses, etc. To see the planning that's involved with maintaining the value of the community's investment in our instruments is very impressive to me, and I was thrilled to see it.
This is year 3 of 5, so we have 2 more to go.
It's terrific. It really is.
Great. Page 24. 25.
Hang on. I had something about 24.
Go for it.
2/3 of the way down, private and parochial textbooks. It's $48,500. It's perfectly reasonable. It's in line, but it's an interesting example of an expense we have in our budget on that top line, where the students that it supports aren't represented when people are doing sort of like a quick cost per student calculation. If you just take the whole budget and divided by the students that are in our district, you get these strange distortions, of which this is one, where you've got $50,000, which is completely reasonable for textbooks for private and parochial students, but those students aren't represented on the other side of the equation. And I think that's in the budget in a lot of places. It's interesting.
And this cost doesn't even include the labor that we
That's
use
true.
to give out those textbooks. And I'm happy that Mrs. Miller is here. Summertime, she spends all her time giving out textbooks to the private and parochial schools. And this is in addition to the textbooks that are given out through the BOCES program. So half the job is done here, and all her time is spent on that. She has to inventory them, she has to order them, and she has to package them for parents to pick up.
But wouldn't every district have the same line item budget? It might vary based upon the number of students enrolled in
Theoretically, yes. It could be
and
much higher.
private
course.
schools. So it's not a cost, just like busing those students is not a cost that's unique to North Shore. In fact, since we own our own buses, the busing end of those private and parochial
Hold
schools
on.
may
I
be
think
less. I'm just saying that
that's some.
I'm just
really
saying
speculating now.
that you're speculating on the other end. I mean, I just every school has the same budget lines.
Absolutely.
Every school
100%
district
sure.
online. We're all subject to the same regulations.
Yeah.
So we all have those same costs built into our budget. They may vary, just like the cost of our salaries may vary, just like the cost of our administration may vary from
No.
district to
It's a
district.
very different
But it's a line item that every single budget has.
Absolutely true, but how it impacts every district is entirely different. And so what we really need, if we're going to discuss this, is the state should be putting out much better numbers on this, right? The state could absolutely require the reporting to be different so that these numbers could be split out so that you don't have a number on one side that's unrelated to the number on the other side, right? There's absolutely ways to create formulas so that everybody would know how much money is just passing through your budget. And that's not just about money, private and parochial schools. That's money, for example, if a district's 20% of their revenue came from grants versus a district where none of their money came from grants, that entirely skews a quote unquote cost per student number because everything in the budget is considered a cost, right? Regardless of whether it's tax levy or whether it's entirely free money given to you from any source, right? On the one side. And then on the other side is the question of what counts as the number of students that you have. And it's entirely different for every single district.
Just like the revenue
So
number
what
can
we
vary.
need- Exactly.
Because you have other districts that don't have a power plant that's contributing.
Oh,
So
that's different variables.
that would impact what the tax levy is. All I'm saying to you is,
Exactly.
I'm not arguing with you. All I'm saying to you is the implication that you were making
No.
was that skews the number on the cost per student. And what I'm saying to you is that is a number, skews it higher, but that is a number that every district may take into account. And our
Okay.
number may indeed be higher than, let's say, Garden City, which would skew it the other way, but it may be less than Garden City, which would skew it the other way.
Yes. And it's not okay to say I'm implying one way or the other when I point out merely that it is something that impacts the budget and is different for every district in 100 different ways. My point was the complexity, and my words were that this is something that impacts our budget in a specific way. It impacts every budget in a specific way. I did not say otherwise.
The way you phrased it, however,
That is not
left the impression with me,
Okay,
and I'm sure with
I
other
think it's important
members.
that we come to the board and come to these meetings by expressing our take on these things. I don't think it's helpful to be over-interpreting what additional trustees are saying. the salient point for me that I was going to make, that Sarah in part made it for me, and I think, Marion, you're backing this up as well. I certainly hope you're not saying, no one from this dais is saying, that if you take the overall expenditure for this district and divide it by the number of students, you have anything resembling an accurate number of cost per student. I think that's the point. Is anyone disputing that? Because I think the purpose of us being up here in the dais is to provide clarity and information and facts to the community so they can make a decision. This board by law is not allowed to go out and tell anyone to vote for the budget or not vote for the budget. This board is about, first of all, at this point, understanding and questioning whether the presentation of the administration makes sense for this community. And we are, of course, the representatives of the community who make that determination. But there's also a role for this board in sharing factual, truthful information. Whereas other people in the community can say and do whatever they like, wherever they like, this board from this dais, we're interested in facts. And one of the facts that I am thrilled we are all now agreeing with, because it's indisputable, is that our cost per student is not simply all of our expenses divided by the 2,500, 2,600 students who go through our halls and coming up with a number. That math may be more for us or less for us than different schools, and we can talk about why that is. That number may be skewed, as I think you're both agreeing, differently in different districts based on the number of students that attend parochial schools, the number of parochial schools within the districts, and various other obligations. For example, one small thing, not that small, it could be over $500,000, is the St. Christopher School that we, and we're going to discuss that a little bit later tonight, that we by law are obligated to pay for the students from the city who are placed in that school, which is certainly a good experience for those kids, and we support those kids, but it comes out of our budget. It is then reimbursed by the city of New York. It's a wash for us, but it still counts in our expense line. So when people point out and say, well, you're spending this much money, well, they should automatically lap, I think last year was $600,000, and concomitant expenses as well, that add to that number, but that's not what's done in the community. So from this dais, from these microphones, that's an opportunity to share that factual information that cost per student is not simply expenses divided by the number of students. So I think that's the point that I think we can all agree on, and I think was important to be made. And I thank you both for helping to clear that up.
Well, I would think that if we believe that that is an overly simplistic approach as to the cost per students, then we should try and come up with a way to accurately, comparatively reflect the cost per student.
So again, just in the interest of clarity, I don't disagree with that at all. But you said if we agree that it is an inaccurate and at the very least inelegant way of coming up with that number, do you dispute that that is not an accurate number?
I didn't say it was inaccurate. I think it's overly simplistic that doesn't take in all the details of the budget.
Okay.
I do believe that every district has the same budget lines. What varies is revenue, aid, and those number lines. But I don't think that I don't think that even we have the access to make to the information to differentiate those numbers. And I think it's difficult for the community to have the complete information to come up with a detailed number. But I think if we believe that this number is, I would say, overly simplistic, then we need to come up with a better way to make that calculation and make those comparisons. Just like when we do comparisons on achievements, every year we see the graphs and we compare ourselves to what we consider to be our cohort. We don't take into account necessarily the number of special ed students, or if we tend to keep our special ed students in district, which we are committed to, which I'm proud of. Other districts don't do that. So when you're looking at achievement, there's really, because district varies, there's not an apples to apples comparison. What I'm saying is that rather than just saying it's not accurate, obviously we're not going to do this tonight, but in the future, it would be an interesting project for us to come up with a better way to define the cost per student and we've included more broadly. One of the reasons why maybe comparing us to Manhasset is not accurate. We have 3 buildings, elementary buildings, they have 2. We have different programs than they do. But at the end of the day, not all of those programs are required. That's a community decision as to what we value. But I think we need to, I think the point is the community wants to understand what is differentiating the cost.
I think that's there's a lot in there that I agree with, and I know that last year, I believe it's also on video, we went through, and one of the days we went through these, I tallied it up as we went, and I came up with, only in the section we covered, and again, I mentioned earlier we're doing part 3 on March 3 on 3, or something like that. But also only one of those 3 sessions, I came up with $4 million of expenses that weren't for our actual students. That was a day we covered St. Christopher's, and that was 600 of them. Again, we can't know. From my perspective, and everyone here has their own perspective, and everyone here should have their own perspective, because we're 7 individuals, of course, we act as a board. From my perspective, I don't know that it's that important to spend a tremendous amount of time trying to figure out precisely $1 per student. I think when we're looking at the actual dollars that we're spending and where we're spending them and why we're spending them, I think that regardless of where people fall on this debate, I think it is very clear that this is a community that has invested heavily in our school district. We have not gone on the cheap. We do not try to cut corners. We do not try to, as I won't name the districts, but some districts don't let their kids enroll openly in all different classes. They don't let their special ed kids take all the advanced classes and take the examinations because they don't want to hurt their numbers. We want every student here to succeed. We're going to be talking about BOCES today, where we find students and their programs out of our district that work better for those kids to discover themselves and find their path in this world. And that's the ultimate goal of what we're doing up here, in my opinion, is to help the 2,600 kids who are here, who live here because their parents or families or guardians bought or rented homes in this district, to give those kids every advantage that we think they need to succeed in this world. And I personally don't have any regrets or shame about saying that we are a district that invests heavily in those kids' future. Now, whether you want to look back, and maybe people do want to look back and say, how do we come up with that accurate number? But I don't think that if we spend X number of dollars per student in that perfect way of formulating it, which I'm not sure you ever really could, versus some other district that maybe spends more or less, for me, that's not really going to tell me that much. I don't need to know that we're more expensive or less expensive than another district to know that what these lines are in here specifically are doing. When we talk about, as Sarah mentioned, these minutia lines, 1,500 for film laminating, that's not just a line. That's about elementary school kids who are doing hands-on projects that can be developing their skills, developing their creativity that we foster in this district. And like every cost on these massive amounts of pages, that does total $114, $115 million, is spent in the right way. And that's what I feel my obligation is to the taxpayers, to make sure it's done responsibly, and the students that we have to educate. That's just my take on this. Are there other questions or comments on this topic or on other aspects of the budget before we move on?
Which page are we on?
We were on 20. I moved to 24 a little early. Went back. I moved to 25 a little early. We went back to 24, talking about private and parochial school textbooks.
So 25?
We can go to 25. Everyone's done with 24. More textbooks,
May I?
please.
So it's a little hard to see, but my rough estimate is if I look across all the textbook lines, it looks like a net decrease of about 43,000 across the textbook categories. So my question on that is, like with all inventories of value, whether it's computers or musical instruments or whatever, if you have textbooks that are aging, we would want to replace them or update them on as regular a cycle as possible. And we've definitely seen over the years with budget lines, you see individual budget lines are going to go up and down because we're not replacing all the textbooks every year. So I wanted to ask if there was a place that we should be investing money because no one wants, for example, out-of-date science text, etc. And see if there was something that you felt we should be doing, but we were concerned about just the budget because the budget's very tight.
I think there are a couple pieces here. One is that I think the analogy of to instruments is a good one, but the difference is that now when we're coming up on replacement, what the replacement is different because, especially since the pandemic, we have free open source peer reviewed textbooks like in science using OpenStax through Rice University.
Mm-hmm.
We have specific replacements that are lower cost and I'd say superior. So that's where that analogy might be different. And the other part is that we have done a lot of replacement in the last 4 or 5 years. So now we're down to, if there is an issue in a department, it's down to one course or 2 courses over time. So we're, for example, some of the texts that 2 years ago we replaced the honors chemistry text that was up. So I think the combination of the amount that we have done in the last 5 years and then the nature of the replacement is lower cost and usually electronic.
That's great news. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Sarah. Yeah, please jump right in there. Just get right up into the mic.
Just a very quick follow-up to Dr. Z. I've just really basic question. Is there an average lifetime of a hardcover textbook?
It really depends on, what drives that the most are the standards and how the standards are changing. For example, I'd say in elementary or middle school science, the next generation science standards and the nature of assessments. For example, with the AP World History text that we adopted last year, the genesis of that was the change in the exam itself from the College Board, and that necessitated that text and a new a new approach.
Very generally speaking, it's much more driven by curricular issues than pure age. But
yes,
and of course now if we move to electronic versions, we won't have any issue with the age.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you, Maria. Page 25 or 26. Yep, just jump right in.
Yeah, it's me again. I thought the very last line of this with the Propio interpretation services was a really interesting example of the thought that's gone into this budget in a lot of places. So it's an interpretation service, and in the narratives, which are extensive, and I hope everyone gets the opportunity to read, there's further description of this. And it turns out that in our tiny district, 16 different languages are spoken at home. And the importance of being able to communicate with every family to this district, not just because it's important to us, but also what the law requires, plays out in these very interesting ways. And it's just, I think it really speaks to what we're trying to do in terms of reaching every child and every family. And it plays out in very interesting ways budgetarily, absolutely not just in these lines, but across the budget.
Thank you. Other questions on this instruction section before we move on to special ed and St. Christopher's? There's
some stuff I think that's worth saying about like the section. This is like, we just went through the budget lines with like regular instruction. But in the narratives, I think there's a tremendous amount of detail that the community would find interesting and engaging and important. And I'm going to take 2 minutes, even 1 minute, to point out some of it. So when you read about secondary math, for example, you'll find out that part of the budget is doing things like creating math for financial literacy. But it's also adding advanced word working. We've got money in there that's going to let us be able to have mechanical engineering and robotics, but also linear algebra. Like there's just a huge scale and scope of just incredibly inventive, interesting, I'm going to say thoughtful thinking, despite it being an inelegant phrase, that went into what we're going to be able to offer our students next year. In social studies, there's this terrific discussion of New York State Civics Initiative and how we're going to have a pathway towards like a seal for civic literacy that I think so many people would find very heartening to see that in our curriculum. And then I think the flip side of it is that the cost of a high quality education in 2022 is really highlighted as well. That when you're talking about software for coding, resin for 3D printers, robotics kits, but also like actually buying like hardwood for those woodworking classes, that the kind of education children need in this day and age really adds up. And I think those narratives speak so much to the efforts our educators are going to provide that to our kids. It really is this investment in their future.
And it is a huge, huge part of the budget. So we rightfully spent some good time on it. It should be, yeah.
Can I just add my kudos to that? It's been, I mean, as a newbie on the board, it's been incredible to read to read the narratives. They're long and they're intricate, but it, in conjunction, I'm, flipping back and forth constantly, and so many of my questions are answered in the narrative. It's really wonderful. Thank you for that.
And that's been another innovation of Olivia through the years, to bring one of the things that this budget is supposed to do is through the numbers reflect the values, but the narratives connect the dots. So that's the bridge, which is so helpful to us to understand why. With that, please, Dr. Dolan.
I just want to thank Chris, who was instrumental in a lot of these, but also to all of our directors. I won't lie to you that when Olivia presses them on the narratives, they're sometimes resistant. I've given you the numbers, you understand it. Why do I have to explain it? And Sarah just explained exactly why we have to explain it. It does connect the dots. So I'd like to give a lot of credit to and also for the course selection, the new courses, the many new courses we have, to our directors who've been instrumental in moving that educational mission.
And I will again like to give credit to Lois for being on the backs of everyone to prepare the
no one's arguing with that. Thank you, Lois. That said, I am going to move on to the next section, special ed. And I did appreciate, I'm not sure how it exactly happened, but I got in my inbox a promotion of this discussion from SEPTA, who's a partner parent organization that has been promoting awareness of this discussion. So thank you. The district is required to provide all resident students with disabilities a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment to comply with each student's IEP, that's their individual education plan. This budget supports the salaries of this section of the budget supports the salaries of all special education teachers, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, teacher assistants, and teacher aides, as well as tuition for students placed outside the district and resources to comply with the IEPs of these students. The 22-23 budget proposal includes the following staff increases. One new ICT teacher at Glen Head School to split the rising 5th grade class if current enrollment is exceeded. A .4 ILC teacher at the North Shore High School due to the expansion of the ILC program for grades 9 and 10. So with that, I will ask trustees to please weigh in on page 27 to start.
I'll start.
Please.
I have a question about, I just lost it. The special ed staff development. I noticed that there's a decrease of 35,000, which is significant, right? I guess I'm concerned there's such a need to make sure that we're using up-to-date testing, and that our psychologists are trained in new editions of tests and different tests. So I just want to make sure that we think this is adequate.
this is something that I look at very carefully with the director of special education. There's, in addition to this money, we have IDEA grants that are available to supplement staff development. So, and if you look at the 1920 expenditure and 2021 expenditure, those are pretty much in line with what was budgeted in 22-23. So if the need arises, we can use the IDEA grant to supplement it. That's why we cut it down to 63,000.
My other question, I know in the narrative it talked about assistive technology, and but I didn't see it anywhere in this portion of the line by line budget.
I think that that's one also expenditure that we use. He uses. We get pretty sizable amount of money through the IDEA grant, and he uses that also to supplement this budget. So if there's need for it, he can use part of that budget for those assistive technology equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on 27?
I have
Please.
have
Yep.
one.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the code 2250 150 90, the special ed home teaching.
Yes.
That went up significantly. I'm assuming, for instance, from 1920 to 2021, partly because of the significant change in how we're delivering teaching during the pandemic. And I'm just wondering, would you expect it? I mean, and you have it budgeted a little bit higher, both the current year and the projected year. Would we expect that to stay at that level for a while? Or
I'm hoping that the pandemic will be over, but it's all because of the uncertainties of the pandemic. So the projection, we have to position ourselves, because if we need those services, because you cannot predict those services, you have to make some kind of provision for it.
Right.
Because if kids are home, after a certain number of days, we have to provide them with the instruction. And this is where we go to.
any thoughts? I'm wondering why it was actually quite a bit higher way back in 2018-19, and then dropped significantly before coming.
It
back
is
up.
possible there's only one child that we have to provide.
Right.
those services
Okay.
to.
That's
We
yeah.
have to delve deeper into that code to see what happened. One or two children.
Thanks, Olivia.
So I have another question.
We're approving IEPs later today, but certainly in looking through them, some of them are this big, and some of them are significantly more cumbersome.
Thank you,
So,
Dave.
yeah.
The voice of experience. That was actually the point I wanted to make, was that we have a whole bunch to approve later on, and
Yes.
and I did look through them, and it is in some cases, and it's actually, it's sobering, but it's also wonderful to see us supporting every single need that those children need.
Yeah, one student could have an IEP that requires 30 minutes monthly,
Right.
and then there's the other end of the extreme. But of course, we take care of we provide for those due to the IEP.
And the IEP shows the delivery location, and in many cases, it is in fact home.
Yes, the IEP show the frequency. They show who was in on the discussion. They show the progress. It's a comprehensive document anonymously for us.
Right.
And it should also be noted that when you see a lot of services being provided at an early age, the goal is to remediate those issues so that you don't have to continue those services long term, right? So there's an enormous benefit that you reap, both the child individually in the remediation, but also the overall cost in terms of educating a child over the course of their educational career. I did have one question, Olivia, because we've heard a lot about increase in special ed referrals because of the pandemic, children coming in kindergarten, first grade, who had not been in nursery school and preschool, the increased mental health issues. I mean, it's reported all over. So I thought this was going to be one area that we saw an increase in spending compared to the previous year, but it's actually a decrease by about, I think, 67,000, though I don't have readers yet. I'm trying not to admit that. Can you just speak a little bit about why you think that is? Is it because of the individual, like BOCES students going down?
Yeah, we go kid by kid, analyze the services that each kid requires through the IEP. So this is not something that is done randomly. So what we have here is attached to the number of students we have. It is possible that when we start implementing the budget next year, some of these costs will go higher than we have anticipated. Yes, we have to find money in other codes to provide those services. So there are so many unknowns at this point in time because we are putting the budget together, which we'll be implementing 6 months down the road. So it's nothing here is baked in stone.
So
It's going to change.
I want to make sure that if referrals do increase, we're not in a situation where we're denying services or raising
Absolutely not.
or lowering the threshold for what it would take to get services.
Absolutely not.
Can I make a quick comment about that too? Because I had the same thought, and I was wondering about the director of special ed because I knew that was a new position, but that's in a different section. So I was thinking, how could the budget go down with the new director? But that's in the personnel.
Yeah, please.
It's funny. I was going to mention that because there is a big increase in the special ed budget, but in another section.
Yes.
And as we discussed, and by way of transparency, it was on one of the slides 2 weeks ago. The assistant director who was added this year is not in this year's budget, and therefore it's an up in next year's budget. Amy did join us 2 weeks ago, Ms. McKee. We've all met with her now, and she's certainly hit the ground with both feet running. We're happy to have her.
Yeah, I was going to comment on this, that how detailed the special education budget is, that we've got as many as 30 students, right, where we really on page 29, anonymously, of course, but we are budgeting literally student by student for those 30 students with very specific needs, and that's how we build the budget. And when you're building it on that level of detail down to the students, year to year, it can go up or down. It's absolutely just dependent on the students'
Yes.
needs in our district at that time.
Yes.
Thank you.
I thought that was reflected also back on page 27 with, we're way up at the middle school level on full-time teachers, and then we have and fewer aides versus at the high school level, which is a difference. Obviously, it's all driven by the individuals, but those high school years, as we saw in our previous budget review, the middle school years, our enrollments in those cohorts are really, we have another big bubble coming through. 213, 228, with two of those classes. We just graduated to 240, and we said, wow, that's a biggie. And we know that 228 right now is going to gain students by the time they graduate as families move in. So again, those numbers are reflected by the individual student experiences. Other questions on page 27 or 28? I would like to just quickly note on page 28, we're down about $197,000 on special ed tuition private. Does that reflect fewer kids or more kids coming back to North Shore, or possibly something else?
It's a combination.
Okay.
And in addition to that, it depends on the program that the kids are going into.
Gotcha.
So, some of the program, the rate is set by the state. We don't set the rate at all. So depending on the program that the kids are going into, the cost may be lower. But when you look at the following page, you have 16 students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we go kid by kid for private placement as well as public placement.
That's good. I didn't mean to make it a multiple choice, Olivia.
No.
I should just ask, tell me. Pages 29. Page 30 again addresses St. Christopher's. the North Shore School District is responsible for the education and transportation of up to 6 school-age children placed at the St. Christopher residential facility located within the district's geographic boundaries. There are currently 4 students attending BOCES programs in a private school. All costs incurred by North Shore are reimbursed by the students' home districts. Any questions on St. Christopher's?
This is the line you were talking about before, that sometimes as high as 600.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. At the moment, 400,000.
But it would be offset by the revenue we receive. It's just unfortunately
Right,
not zero. It's
right.
not zero because we frequently do not get the revenue until the following fiscal year.
Well, right. That was our point, was that it's a cost, but it's not a cost. It's money that flows through the budget, but it is, to your point, a cash flow issue. A lot of these are cash flow issues.
Right.
All right, good. We'll now move on to page 31, occupational and continuing ed. The budget covers tuition for vocational education, evening adult education programs, and the cost of summer remedial programs for high school students. It's anticipated that 33 11th and 12th graders will enroll in vocational programs in 22-23 school year. It's also anticipated that 5 students will enroll in the Long Island High School for the Arts. The North Shore School's adult ed department provides a variety of educational opportunities to residents, including musical groups and exercise classes, and many other things. Questions on continuing ed for BOCES summer school?
Just a quick comment.
I'm going to go with Lisa, just because I feel like I hear the person closer to me, and then Maria.
I just wanted to say that, especially with BOCES, it was so interesting in the narrative to see all of the different programs we offer. And I do want to remind the public that the narrative is on our website under the BOE section, under the budget section, so you can read through that and see all of the different programs that are offered. It runs the gamut, and it's just so interesting to see the different classes, the different courses.
Yes, Dr. Dolan?
And not just offered, but taken advantage of. Next year, for example, we'll have students in everything from construction to HVAC, carpentry, power sports engine, aviation, cosmetology, fine arts, electrician, dental assistant. I mean, there really are some really practical programs. And the number, in fact, is up next year. This year we were at 29, and next year we do anticipate 33, as Trustee Jones said.
I
Happy to
would
do it.
also like to point out on the continuing ed that this expense number is also offset by revenue.
Great point.
All right, so you're looking at an expense, but that expense may not is not the actual expense because there's a revenue portion.
Yeah. And for the record, as long as we're here, let's put a plug in. Please, when it comes to your home, look at it. There's great stuff there. That said, I will move on. Marie, you said you're good?
Lisa, thank you. You covered it.
Okay. Other instruction, library and audiovisual. The library and AV budget supports the library program, including library books, online databases, video conferencing software, AV support for large groups, including parents and Board of Ed meetings. It also includes the budget to loan library materials to the Greenville School, which is located within the North Shore School District. The state reimburses the district for the cost of the library loan program. Each school district in New York State is allotted a maximum of 6.25 multiplied by the number of pupils attending both public and private schools within the district boundaries, and the Greenville School is the only private school located within North Shore. Question on page 32.
That would be me.
Sure.
So we've made very serious efforts in the past few years to make sure that our book collections are up to date and meeting the needs of our students. But nonetheless, for me, this category really illustrates what the impact of the tax cap has been. Been on the tax cap for a number of years. In many of those years, we've had situations where benefits and personnel costs have used up just a huge percent of what the tax cap allows you to increase your revenue by. And what we've done over time is just continue to tighten up every budget category that we possibly can. And I think libraries is one of those places where you can really see that. When I started on the board, every library had both a librarian and a clerical position. the clerical positions are long gone. You can see the difference in what the book budgets were in 1819 and what they are now. And there are a lot of different things that are going on. Some of that money is moved to like classroom libraries, and some of it is moved to digital resources. And a couple of years ago, when we had extra funds, we put those money into books. But there's no question that when you go back 5 years, our library budget is significantly less than it's been in the past. And I think it really illustrates that we've clearly had to make choices in all of these years about where we're going to spend money, that we're not in a situation where we can all have everything that we ever dreamed of, but that everybody is trying to make really smart, calculated choices about where funds should go. And our budget is different than a lot of the budgets that you see posted from other districts online, in that we do have actual expenditures going back to 1819 in our regular public budget that we put up on the website. That's not what every district does. But in this case, it makes it very easy for people to see how we've had to shift where our funds are going.
So can I piggyback on that? Because I was also curious about this line. The 2019-2020 expenditure was $164,000 on library books, which is $81,000 more than we are right now, just about twice as much. So I wasn't sure if that was a bubble year. I did look at the budget status report for December that we approved earlier tonight. That's the budget status report, of course, that we always approve and we always see. And we have our entire time on the board, of course, I'm sure long before that. It showed that most of the $81,000 we budgeted for the current year has either been spent or encumbered. We only have about $10,000 unspent. 85% of it has been encumbered through December. So I wonder if we're done for the year, or if this is going to end up being more for the year. And I'm happy. I applaud the decision to support the books in our libraries, but I wonder if this is a line that does need to be more accurately reflecting what the plan is for next year.
Okay. So what happened, I have to go back 1 year or two. During the pandemic, when we had to social distance our kids in the classroom, we had to have multiple sections and multiple classroom libraries. So we had to find money to give to the teachers to buy more library books.
Okay.
Hence the expense.
Gotcha. Okay. Great. I appreciate that. I also, just tying these budget lines in that budget status report to where we are right now and seeing the progression goes, it's why the board does need to see that budget status report.
Yeah.
It's a shame we had to waste money defending the fact that we all see it, but it's a good illustrative opportunity to show what we do with it. So I thank you both. Other questions on page 32? Page 33, the AV library section. Moving on to page 34, which is technology. Technology budget supports 1 director of technology, 2 computer technicians, 4 computer aides, 1 secretary, and 3 outsourced computer technicians. Nassau BOCES provides network engineering support, student management system, instructional, financial, and cafeteria point-of-sale system software, and are all hosted off-site. The budget includes plans to continue to enhance cloud data backup services, replacing aging Chromebooks on a rolling basis, and start phase 2 installation of smart panels. Are there questions in the technology section, page 34? We'll do the section, page 34 through 37. Are there any questions in this section?
There may be specific questions, but I just had to say that the narrative on this was terrific. Like, it was such a thoughtful discussion of the improvements we need for network security, but also network resiliency. And laying it out in that multi-year plan was very reassuring. It maintains the value of our inventory. It has a regular cycle of replacements that you want to see. But what was a little different in this one that I hadn't seen before was we now also had this new emphasis on how the new student information system can produce savings in the future, right? By eliminating redundancy, paperwork, by improving automation. And so that kind of thinking that we saw there, that we see in a lot of places in the budget about how we're going to leverage the investment we made last, I guess in the current year or the year before, I'm not sure when we straight paying for the student information system is going to help us in the future. So thank you.
Kudos to
Right, we
Elliot
can't
K, who is
always.
here.
Exactly right.
Yeah, a minute ago, I offered kudos to a bunch of directors who are not here. Hopefully, they're watching. But in this case, I can point to the back of the room at our director of technology, Elliot, and say, Elliot, the words you just heard are about your narrative and what you offered and the planning that you offer us. And thank you very much. Thanks for that. Thanks for being here tonight and for these whole 3 pages. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, I know last year we talked about, after the initial presentation of the budget and some discussions, we came back to the administration and said we had to shave. And there were some things that we talked about shaving, and one of the ones that we were not able to cut or did not choose to cut was the transition to Infinite Campus. So I know from the parent perspective how that's working, but I wonder if you could just let us know how that's working, how that implementation has been going. Are we over the hump? Are we ready? Is this pretty much business as usual now? So those are two questions in there.
Yeah. I was just going to say it was, was a learning curve at first in the summer. A lot of and the beginning of the school year, a lot of training. But between Elliot and Miss Lieberman and some of our other sports staff and our teachers were really, and Mr. Doherty, in a really great place with that, and it's helping us to solve some of those problems that we couldn't with Power School.
Thank you, Maria.
I just really want to add my kudos. These are pages I actually, understand a little bit better even than some of the other parts of it because I have a somewhat of a technology background, and I'm pretty floored at what you accomplish, Elliot, with a really small staff and an enormous task every day. So this was, and the narrative was very good.
Good. I think with that, we will move on to pages 38 through 41, which, depending on your perspective, will be the good or disappointing news. This will be the last section we'll cover tonight, and it's attendance, guidance, and health. Let's start with page 38, which is attendance. Hey,
Olivia, will you tell us about the significant decrease in that top line on attendance? The clerical?
There was an agreement with one of our units, and one position wasn't replaced last year, and that's what you see there.
Thank you.
In other words, someone retired and was not replaced.
Correct.
Confirmed. Thank you. I remember that discussion now that you mention it. Page 39, guidance.
I have a question about the SEL social and emotional learning consultant. It's a line for $12,500. I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit more about this. And I'm also curious where we've talked a little bit about developing a partnership with Northwell in terms of providing like mental health support. And I'm curious if that's anywhere in this budget.
So, one concept that we've discussed in wellness committee, and with the leadership team is that, social emotional learning is something very different than mental health. It's something that, serves different roles. Our consultant provides training for parents, programming for parents and teachers as well. As also advising us on task force. So we have, for example, school avoidance task force that Mr. Doherty has been working on with some of the mental health providers, and our consultant has helped us with that. Professional development for teachers as well. There is a Northwell partnership that a lot of neighboring districts participate in. They offer clinical services that's just much more convenient for families. They also offer some professional development as well. The consultant tailors what he does to our needs and works with a smaller group of districts, whereas in this case the Northwell services are much more standardized and kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. So we do have from Mr. Doherty some potential expenses that those are not reflected in the budget. But I will be because this was recent, after the submission of the budget draft within the last week or so, we'll submit to the board some of those numbers in the proposal, and can look at alternative funding sources, grants, and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Maria?
Just wanted to point out, this is also where we see the LICAD assistance program, right, on the drug counseling that we talked about earlier. And I wanted to use that as a jumping off point. Again, I saw this, I think the gentleman who will be our primary person on campus speak at the CASA event the other night, and it was wonderful. It was very encouraging.
Okay, other questions on the guidance section through page 41? All right, with that, I will wrap up this
Dave,
section.
Wait, Dave,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I can't see.
I know,
down
can't see it. I have a question on co-curriculum and athletics. I know it's in the next section, and we covered it last meeting, but the narrative was in this meeting's section.
Ask away, Lisa.
Okay. Well, I was reading the most recent Viking View, and one of the cover articles was very well written and convincing, and talked about our athletes' uniforms, and it basically talked about how many were the wrong size or older, and I was just wondering where the line item for in the athletics budget was for uniforms, where that was. I wasn't sure if it was under supplies. Because that wasn't, now I can't find it, but
It's 22. It should be on page 43. Reconditioning. That is
okay, I see.
2855, 491.
I see it.
So a few years back, we had an issue with the football helmets, and those are helmets. Some of those helmets, they get reconditioned, and they're useful life. And at that time, there was a presentation from Don Lang about how there is a schedule on uniforms, on when uniforms and equipment are replaced. Just like you have the instrument replacement, there is a similar schedule for athletic equipment and uniforms. Just so you know, by way of background.
I appreciate that. I was just wondering if it might need to be reevaluated, just to make sure we're ordering the proper sizes and,
I'll be happy to
Yeah.
speak to Mr. Lang
Okay.
and follow up and direct his attention to that article also, which I did see
Thank
in
you.
the Viking. But I'll have feedback to the board on his perspective on uniforms.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you. It's a refrain that I've certainly heard as well, and I've happened to see a lot of sporting events this year, and I think it's something that could probably be looked at for sure. Okay. All right. I'm looking forward to closing this heavy book.
Can I mention one thing? For the next meeting we have when we go through more budget lines, I'm not sure we have budget pages D12 through 17 on the schedule. They're in the book, but they're not anywhere on the schedule.
Oh, okay.
It's commercial insurance and BOCES, and then supervision of instruction. They're very slim sections, but I think they escaped.
That's a great catch, Sarah.
One other thing too, a question came up from a community member on how we build the budget, and I know it's sort of backwards because now we're at this point, but the question came up, and it might be interesting if you and Olivia can speak to that at the next meeting, maybe in the superintendent's report, maybe before the particular budget lines, about how this process starts. I'm sure Olivia is already thinking about next year's budget and starting it, but technically it sort of starts in the fall, right, with the principals and the administrators coming, and then we get their budgets and it gets pared down. So like a little 2-minute or 3-minute summary, I think would be helpful for the community so they understand where the numbers come from and how they're derived.
I'll be happy and proud to describe it.
That's great. Marion, great point. I hear that question as well, and I think it's worthy of Dr. Dolan putting some thought to it and really explaining to the community where this comes from. Sorry, you got a little more to do. We will now move on to action item 11, which is personnel. I'd like to ask for a motion on action item 11, A through J. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second? I think we heard a second. I have a question. I have a comment. I don't know if anyone else has a comment or question before I proceed. Tonight we have a unique item, which has not surprisingly driven the attendance of a lot of people who I assume have very mixed feelings, as I do, and that we will be accepting the resignation letter of Olivia Blotzy tonight. Yeah, I know, that's a gasp. That's a worthy gasp I heard over here. And I'm just going to say this because I wrote this down, Olivia, because I didn't want to ad-lib this. Because I didn't think I would trust myself. I knew the letter was in this board backup, and I delayed reading it for several days, which is classic avoidance. But once I got to it, I was struck just by the immense impact you've had on this district. Thousands of North Shore students and their families who pass through these halls. I want to thank you for penning such a heartfelt letter. You have certainly found the money, as you said, but I also think it's very clear that you brought a lot of vision to the table as well. All along the way, you always prioritize children at the top of all your considerations. And I know this from being in business myself. It is very rare to find someone who's a numbers person, but also understands the real implication of those numbers and why we add them up. After over 20 years of service to the district, I will raise my hand to accept your resignation begrudgingly because you have so much still to give, but also with a huge amount of appreciation at what you've given and the happiness that you've made this decision on your terms at the time that's right for you and your family. I want to thank you for everything, Olivia. I personally love working with you. I am going to miss you. I am glad we have this one more budget season and several more months to work together. And it's important to let the community know, of course, that we will find someone to fill this role. The show must go on. And this board will not waver from its commitment to being the gold standard of school accounting and finance, as our auditors have told us we are for years and years. But it's also fair to say you're leaving some extremely big shoes to fill. So on behalf of the community, I want to thank you, Olivia, so much. I will ask the board to, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll take a moment here. Absolutely.
Oh my God. And this is Lois Trevor. And the business office.
Yeah, one thing about Olivia, everyone should know, every time you compliment Olivia, like a reflex, she thanks her team. She points out her team. It is a team over there, and that is also a testament not just to the teammates, of course, but also to Olivia to create that culture over there. After over 20 years, it's going to be different, Olivia. So there will be other moments to celebrate this. I'm not gonna belabor it too much, but the support you have, the people who are here, it's a testament, a small tip of the iceberg testament to what you've done. I'm so appreciative. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you. That said, any other questions or comments on personnel? All right. All in favor of approving this, say aye. Aye. Thank you. We have action item 12, which is the approval of a memorandum of agreement with the North Shore Administrators Association. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We will now move on to number 13, which is public comment. We have our podium here. If people can come to the podium, please just say your name, your town of residence. Again, thank you all for coming and support for Olivia, of course. Name, town of residence, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
There you go. Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Visit Glen Head. Olivia, this is the worst news for me to hear right now. I just want to let everyone in the public know that any interaction I've ever had with Olivia Bawasi is not just about numbers or money. Even before I got on the board, she'd always ask, how are my children? How are they doing? From when they were little bitty babies in kindergarten to when they were leaving the doors. And I have to tell you, she is all about the kids, all about the kids. And I appreciate that. And we should all appreciate that. Thank you for your service.
Lisa, thank you so much. Please. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Other public comment. Is the little letter?
No, now it's on.
Thank you.
You can hear me. Paul Pasculgin from Glen Head. Haven't seen you guys in a while, so great to be back. I just had a question about COVID relief aid. At the end of last year, North Shore received, I believe, $750,000 of American Rescue Plan money and another $300,000 in state aid related to COVID. We haven't heard really what the school district has been doing with that money. I don't see it in the budget. Is there a way that you guys could provide an accounting of where that money is going and how and what it's being used for?
Yeah. I'll hand it off to Tom, and you can respond. Or
we can certainly do a more extensive accounting than what you're about to hear, Paul. But the question's already been raised, and in a minute, I'm going to defer to my colleague, Dr. Zublionis, who was responsible for expending a lot of that. I do know that there have been a number of positions that we filled this year that we've been able to add to our staff, especially our mental health staff, because of that money. But again, let Dr. Z detail it a little bit more. But with the understanding that we will, in the interest of being transparent, we'll get some more information to the public on that.
Thanks, Paul.
I'll just add that there's an initial budget that the state required us to complete, and that is posted online under our Carissa funds under the district homepage. But just an overview, a lot of, like many districts, we use that fund to support summer programs, learning loss, served over 1,000 students. For learning loss support during the school year, for math and reading, for E&L services as well. But yes, we can provide much more detail on that.
And one distinguishing thing about those grants is we are required by the state to account for it in the special aid fund. It's not in general fund. That's why you don't see it in the budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Z, I'm sorry. Could you tell us one more time where to find it on the special budget that you talked about through the state on the website?
If you go onto the district homepage under the district tab, there's a tab that says ARP Carissa Funds. Those are the two funds that we're talking about for the purposes of supporting students due to specific difficulties and challenges that arose out of the pandemic.
And if we're going to do further research, we'll certainly get back to Mr. Pasculjian, but also we'll post it under that for Hensel as well, so we can have it all there for other folks, because it's a good question. We'll do. Okay. Other questions or comments from the public?
Good evening, Gabrielle Menuza from Glenwood Landing. I just had a question about the masking policy. Dr. Dolan, you said that when New York State revokes the mask mandate or removes the mask mandate, I interpreted what you said to mean that North Shore would still reserve its right to impose a mask mandate. I just wanted to clarify what you were saying about that.
So way back when school reopened not last September, the September before, the district had to submit a plan. And the district at that time had a mask mandate that was in place and was in place for, I think, all of last year. What I'm proposing to the board is that we suspend the district mandate, not eliminate it, but suspend.
Okay.
Then when the governor suspends her, we go mask optional. Right. I am proposing to keep ours in place because let's say after the April vacation, I'm hoping this doesn't happen in February, but the April vacation, we come back and the numbers go through the roof. And we're having those conversations again like we did back in January. Can we open? I'd like to have that tool in my arsenal to be able to say, hey, let's go back, let's freeze, let's put the masks back on, and this would allow us to do that. I don't anticipate it because of the trajectory that we're all seeing, but in the interest of public health, it is something that I'd like to have at our disposal.
Can I also add, I know that there's not a tremendous amount of trust, perhaps, from the folks who've been particularly unhappy about the masks, but I will still go ahead and say this is not going to be a yo-yo policy. It's not going to be, oh, there's a bunch, we're talking about extreme situations that could occur. So once this happens, and we all believe that at some point relatively soon, the governor will be removing that mask mandate, we will be prepared, not during the one day, if it happens midday. Hopefully the governor has signaled, unlike past people in that position, that she has at least looked at the school calendar and knows what day of the week it is and knows when things are. And hopefully these things will be occurring on, not in the middle of the day again. But if we are put in that situation, we don't want to have the chaos with those kids. But when that change happens, as Dr. Dolan said, that will be the new plan in place. And we are extremely hopeful that that will be the plan going forward.
Sorry, just to clarify, that was actually because a court decided that there is still a pending court case on the issue. So at any time, a court could just say the mandate is unconstitutional and no one can impose it.
My understanding was that specific one, upon the advice of our attorneys as well, is that the constitutionality was about the method by which that mask mandate was in place, not the personal freedom issues that underlie the larger debate in our society. Which is yeah. So that day was, no one was happy that day.
Well, what it was saying was that you need a law by the legislature to impose a mask mandate instead of an administrative regulation through administrative law.
Correct.
So that's what the particular issue is.
Correct. Our understanding is underlying this, and I know this is not going to make everybody happy per se, is that is about the state mandate. But schools still do have the right to impose that policy. But we are really hopeful, and that's why we signaled this today, that we're going to follow the elimination of that when we can going forward.
And Ms. Menuza, just to add one other thing. Thank you for your question, because if anybody in this room didn't understand it, that means I need to do a better job of explaining that in my letter. So thanks.
Okay.
Hi, Cindy Craig, Glenhead. Just the comment on, again, the mask mandate, and if our governor obviously, expires the mandate or gets rid of it, I just want to make the board aware of the executive order that our Nassau County executive put in place, where that if the state mandate is over with, it leaves it not just to the board, but to parents. The wording is in there. So I just want the board to be aware of that and maybe look into that executive order a little bit more, because if the state mandate ends, I, as a parent, am going to be making the decision. I don't think, according to that executive order, that the board can make a decision otherwise.
Thank you. Other comments from the public?
Hello, Roger Friedman, Seacliff. Regarding the cost per student metric, actually I'm going to back up, and I apologize, this may be a little long, I just wrote it here, it's kind of stream of consciousness. First of all, thank you all for volunteering to serve our community, especially over the past 2 years. It's been quite a challenge. I know I speak for many people when I say we really appreciate it. Thanks for going through the budget line by line in public and in depth. I think that's critical. In regards to cost per student, I think Marianne's suggestion of giving the community some form of benchmarking and actually having this discussion is a good one. I think it's partly programmatic. For example, how do our programs and class sizes differ from other districts, and when do we start things like music and language compared with other districts? I think it also has to do with fixed costs. As any business person will tell you, it costs a certain amount of money to turn on the lights in any building and to operate that building, and to maintain the buildings, etc. So in a district with fewer students like North Shore, that number looks considerably higher because of the divisor when compared to a district with, let's say, 1,000 more students. The question I think we all have to ask is, are we satisfied with the level of education, the quality of the schools, and the value that's being provided to the students and the community, or not? I believe the majority of the parents and homeowners looking at the results North Shore provides kids and our property values would answer that question in the affirmative. Many would not, however. And I do think the board should not shy away from, and indeed needs to engage the community in this discussion. This board and generations of boards of trustees before you have built this system to be one of the best in the country. Award-winning blue ribbon schools, highly ranked elementary schools, better than most in this county, graduates that attend Ivy League and top-ranked universities, championship sports teams, incredible music, theater, and arts programs, and so much more. And while I think some form of benchmarking is a great idea, I also think that people who throw out these comparisons and give examples that say, look, you know, just for round numbers, that North Shore's cost is $5,000 more per student, and seem to be saying that we should be able to reduce cost per student by that much. Doing that math, we'd need to cut, you know, between $12 and $15 million from the budget. What would that mean? Closing an elementary school, significantly increasing our student-teacher ratio by cutting teachers, eliminating art and music, doing away with sports, less investment in technology, less maintenance on the buildings and grounds. What would the effects of these kinds of cuts be on the schools and ultimately this community? I think we need to engage these people specifically and ask if they are advocating for these kinds of cuts. You can't just throw up all over the budget and the district consistently over time, years and years now, and not make a serious proposal. The parents of current students, up-and-coming students, prospective home buyers, and current homeowners need to understand what these people have in mind in detail for the future of a North Shore education. And lastly, Olivia, the community owes you so much for the hard work and dedication to this district, and above all to the students. I don't have the words to express the debt of gratitude that you are owed. So I'm just going to close with some comments that I jotted down after the last audit committee meeting. Dimitri Bantaleskas of Norwalk Smith, our internal auditor, said, from the risk management approach, North Shore has policies in place. The budget is reviewed by the board. There is a reserve plan in place. There are procedures in place for budget development and multi-step meetings and reviews. The level of detail behind Olivia's analysis is pretty extraordinary. And he goes on to say, a district like North Shore with reserves is much better positioned for the future rainy days than a district without reserves. Denise Longobardi, the claims auditor, said, the district has a very low exception rate compared to other districts that I audit. The check error percentage was 0.22% or 0.25%. The dollar amount was 0.3% or 1/3 of 1%. I can't even think that small. I think it's something to be said that the business office works very diligently to make sure the controls in that process are very adequate and to keep us in compliance with all laws. I have to say, I like to look at North Shore's controls and I bring them to other districts because I feel the standards are set high. They are exceptional. And lastly, Alan Yu, the CPA from Cullen and Danowski, our external auditors, said, we consider North Shore to be in the very low risk category for school districts, and we consider North Shore to be the gold standard of financial management. So I congratulate you, I thank you, and I'm going to miss you. Thank you.
Other folks for public comment?
Hi, is it on? No. Hi.
Right. Now mine is not on to respond, but yes, yours is on.
Kelly Arena, Glenhead. So I'm part like statement, part question. But in my experience, I have children in a high school, middle school, and elementary school. And I find this time with COVID to be very difficult because of the our quote policies that the different administration and teachers are taking. Often when we have a question about something, they tell me that they're following the policies. However, I don't feel that the policies throughout the district are consistent, and I'm not too sure where we can find a list of policies going forward. And a couple examples are my daughter who attends Glenwood Lansing had snack outside during the cold weather. It was approximately 32 degrees, and she sat outside to have snack for 15 to 20 minutes. I think there's other alternatives that they can find within the classroom to have snacks, whether it be alternate rows eating at a time, or, you know, some children might eat in the hallway, different things like that in fourth grade. My son's trip in middle school for skiing was canceled partially due to COVID back in January, which I thought was very humorous because the week before that, my daughter in high school went on a track trip overnight to Boston. So some of these events have been very inconsistent. They are following policies and who's making these policies. And so my question is that, you know, moving forward, because whether we have the mask and stuff like that, is there policies? And the biggest reason, not just so much for my own confusion as a parent here in the district, but I think it's at times, especially attending a PTO meeting when in Glenwood Landing we'll be having a talent show coming up in spring, and you have parents now trying to figure out how to hold this talent show because there really aren't policies to follow. So you have parents, oh, we can have it outside. No, it's going to rain. Are you going to have it inside? You can only limit it to 2 parents. So all these situations, and it's kind of putting parents against each other, trying to figure these things out, where I really feel like the school or the board should have some things very clear for us so we as parents don't have to have these discussions that could lead to tension where we're at. So if you guys could maybe come up with something a little bit clearer for us so we can move forward in a more pleasant way. Thank you.
Tom, can you?
Sure. Let me try.
I heard your daughter had a very cool roommate for that
Yes,
track trip.
So first, just to clarify, the policies of the district are actually all posted online, and they're very specific. But I think what you're talking about are some of the practices that we've adopted relative to COVID. And for those, we have followed the guidelines of predominantly the New York State Department of Health. For example, you know, the distancing, the people, you know, how far apart.
Those I understand. I mean,
and
even when you walk into a classroom, though, there are classroom desks that are closer, and there's some that are still very far apart. So it's just the way, there's very gray lines is what I'm saying. A lot of people interpreting these policies differently.
There's certainly some variation, you know,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't want to compare classroom to classroom, and we've tried to get away from taking that yardstick out and measuring how far the desks are apart. We're keeping them at a safe distance.
Right. But in truth, when we were all down that lockdown position and you had that measuring stick, we all knew where we stood. Now we don't. And it's getting difficult, as I'm saying, as a parent in a meeting where we're trying to make decisions and it's not black and white anymore, it's gray. And why are we as parents trying to figure out that gray area?
I will try to post the DOH regulations in a more prominent spot.
And maybe, I mean, honestly, it's some of the administration too has to kind of like step in and kind of like let people know where it is.
I will follow up.
Thank you.
Other comments from the public before we move on to the business section? Okay, I appreciate hearing from folks, and we will move on, as I flick over here, to action 14, which is the approval of our pit musicians for the high school musical, Hello, Dolly. Is there a motion? Thank you. And a second? Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Action 15, approval of those community education spring instructors that we referred to earlier. Motion in a second, thank you. By the way, I should clarify the concept of community education spring instructors. We're going to be certainly not approving the ones who are in the budget that hasn't come out yet. We're approving the ones who are going to be doing it in just a few weeks. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I think there's a very illustrious instructor of the adults Zoom and Google class. I can't wait to sign up for that one. I wanted to just give that one a plug.
The sign up does not reflect what you just said, so we're hoping for more participants. Thank you.
I wouldn't miss this one for the world.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Action 16, approval of the revised 2022-2023 calendar, school calendar. Is there a motion? And a second? Any questions or comments? Dr.
If I
Dole?
could, I would just like to elaborate on that just a little bit. The calendar that was submitted, I think in early January, had a winter vacation that began, I believe, on December the 23rd, Friday, and ended on Sunday, with students returning to school on Monday, January the 2nd. So I love learning stuff, and what I learned is that when January 1st falls on a Sunday, Monday, January 2nd, is a federal holiday, and therefore we must close. I missed that one. I learned it. It's interesting. The calendar was out for several weeks, and no one else caught it. One staff member did, and he hates the fact because winter vacation is his absolute favorite, and he's sorry that he's going to have to come back a day early. But we're adding a day at the other end, and we will make up for it. Still the same number of days. I apologize for any inconvenience. I hope no one's bought airplane tickets yet.
Any other questions or comments before we vote? Okay, all in favor of the swap of days to create this new calendar?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We will be voting on, I'd like to lump action 17 and 18, which are approval to dispose of inventory and acceptance of some donations. Is there a motion on 17 and 18 combined?
Motion.
Thank you, Mary Ann. A second?
Second.
Okay, and any questions or comments on any of these?
I wanted to know if there was any further description of the donation from the Viking Foundation, like example of something we were funding.
Sure. So the Viking Foundation began this idea of innovation grants to support innovation in the classroom right as the pandemic started. And so now we're finally revisiting that. And now I want to thank the Viking Foundation for seeing this through and really supporting our teachers. This donation will fund 3 projects. One for the middle school called the Visual for Vikings, which will allow for better multimedia presentations for the whole school. The second for elementary STEAM using the coding program We Do 2.0, and the third for elementary as well, learning through math games that supports our math specialist teachers who are trying to make some of the basic skills that they teach in math a little more engaging, a little more fun for their elementary students.
Thank you. That really sounds terrific.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor of 17 and 18?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Action 19, which is approval of 2 special education consultant agreements. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Thank you. Any comments, discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Action 20, approval of a special education tuition agreement between North Shore and Oyster Bay East Norwich Central School District. Is there a motion? And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Comments, question? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 21, approval of special education service IEPs. Is there a motion? And a second? Comments, questions on the IEPs? I had some. I think we discussed them earlier. So I will call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Action 22, which is the approval of 2 health services contracts. One with with West Islip School District, and one with Hicksville Union Free School District. A motion? Maria, in a second. Rich, thank you. Comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Action 23. We're good, Betty? We got everyone? Thank you. Action 23, approval of transportation resolution. Motion? Thank you, Rich. In a second. Maria, thank you. Comments or questions on this? Okay, all in favor? Aye. We'll now ask for old business from the board.
I have 2 items. I don't know if they're really old business or new business. They're kind of those things that straddle the line. They really arise from community members' questions that I'm not really in a position to answer. I did discuss them with Chris beforehand, so he's not surprised. But someone was stating to me that there was a survey that went out to the middle school parents that asked questions about gender and sexual orientation. And they were concerned that this type of survey was going out, and they wanted to know if the parents could access the actual survey questions. My response was the only survey that we discussed as a board was the Challenge Success Survey, which really we don't see the questions. I don't think our administrators see all the questions because the questions belong to Stanford University, who develops it. And the point of the survey was for student engagement, and if there were questions of that nature, it was for the purposes of deciphering where if there was a particular group of students who did not feel engaged. And I asked Chris, is that the only survey that went out to middle school parents? And could he discuss the questions that they learned about after and have had discussions with parent groups that were on those surveys?
So, in looking at the Challenge Success Survey, there are identity-based questions that are standard in the survey that work to capture the different ways in which our students identify. And that's important so that the survey is inclusive. And so, as you said, we could see if there are any trend lines along certain identity groups. And in this case, stress, lack of engagement, lack of connection, anything that students would identify as, in this case, a lack of engagement along those identity lines, because that's important to act on that data and to enhance, the district's goal towards engagement. I think that is a question, especially when we're working with studies like surveys like Bach Harrison, the Youth Development Survey, and Challenge Success. To what extent do we give the entire survey out in advance so parents can see all of the questions? What Mr. Doherty and I did was we did send a description of the Challenge Success Survey to parents and an opt-out form. So we always do provide that as an option And parents have asked me about that as well, the extent to which they can opt out of surveys. Not every question that's asked is in that description. And I think that's part of what happened here.
Sorry. I think what I got from the conversation with this particular community member and some other prior conversations with community members is that the student may interpret the question differently than the intent. And that I think, and then bring home that interpretation to the parent. So in thinking it through, this is where like the new business part comes in. I think what we need to do is, after those surveys are administered, is have sort of a debriefing with a cross sampling of the students and ask them about the survey and the survey questions and what they thought the survey was trying to achieve, so that there's no misinterpretation of the intent or the reason behind administering the survey and why particular questions that may seem unrelated are really for a particular purpose.
And the administrative team has been talking about this because we have had a lot of surveys, and so what you're talking about is, I think it helps with transparency, but it also is good research. It's what we would call member checking, to make sure that the questions are asking are measuring what we're intending them to ask and find out, and that's what helps us ensure reliability. But also, having interviews, having focus groups is a great complement to the data that we're collecting. So it triangulates the data to make sure we're getting really at what we're trying to find out. And talking to students, I mean, that is the best data, in my opinion, to act on. And so it helps bring to life what we see in the surveys and gives us more specifics.
Well, I think they work hand in hand, right? So when you interview students, you're only getting a handful of students, right? And sometimes you're getting the same students. You're not getting the cross section. So the survey data gives you, I think, the broader information that is more encompassing, but the student interviews give you more insight and detail into maybe things that the survey did not pick up, or how the student, or what the student thought the question was asking, which may indeed influence the response.
The first time, thank you, Marianne, I thought that was really interesting. And well said. And I had a different angle on it altogether. The first time we gave the Bach Harrison, I got the question about what were students supposed to do, with the question about, like, how would you describe your relationship with your father if we don't have one? Because there was literally no, NA, there was no way out of the question. And, right, as adults, I think there are lots of ways we would be oblivious to how kids are impacted by the survey.
One piece, one way in which we're really trying to work on that, and I know with the subsequent administration of the Bach, we made some changes and they worked with us, and that was really helpful. We're working with an administrative team, Dr. Smythe, Dr. Brooke, people in our leadership team who have done research, to develop our own local surveys and other, methods that could really get us better data to act on, in our school, and perhaps give more frequently. In Wellness Committee, we talked about pulse surveys, which are more frequent surveys that, again, give us more accurate, up-to-date information that we can act on throughout the year, and not just wait, to the survey that's given in June, and then we wait until September to act on it. And, we have a large portion of students who aren't here anymore. So.
All right. Thank you. That's I got some good feedback and a good response as well.
Okay, I have another, if no one else does, the second piece of kind of old new business.
Let's go for it.
Okay, so the other question I received goes back to the curriculum and how the curriculum is developed, the curriculum committees, how the texts are selected that the students read, how the speakers are selected, and how do parents get involved in the selection of curriculum, and how do we I know we have the curriculum maps, but the type of books and speakers we are selecting, and what kind of notice do we give to parents on speakers and the topics that they will be speaking on. And I know that's a really broad topic, but I was hoping that maybe you could speak to once again about how the curriculum is developed in the curriculum committees, and how, if a parent is interested in those committees, the curriculum committees, the Equity for All Learners, those various committees that we have set up, how they can get involved in those committees if the curriculum choices are concerning to that parent.
So, in general, decisions about textbooks or curriculum, those are decisions that are made, by the educators, by the administrators, and there are policies that dictate textbook adoption and curriculum adoption, and that's all under the guidance of Dr. Dolan and you, the Board of Education. We do, of course, talk about such matters as curriculum and texts in the Teaching and Learning Committee. It's a natural outgrowth. The primary purpose isn't to, for curriculum adoption, but to talk about the student experience in classrooms, and we solicit feedback that way. But the final, recommendations are made by the leadership team in conjunction with teachers. So we have the Teaching and Learning Committee, we have the Social Emotional Learning Committee, and we have the Equity for All Learners committees. These are committees that were born out of the strategic plan, one for each of the major pillars, and they have a different focus each year. We had our first meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee actually yesterday, and the Equity for All Learners Committee on Tuesday. And really what we're looking at is engagement. Because of the district goal on engagement, we're looking at engagement through the lens of teaching and learning, through the lens of equity, school climate, and the student experience, positive relationships. Really the focus that really determines how much curriculum would come up in discussion certainly can come up, but formal adoption of textbooks and curriculum, there are policies that dictate that will largely, while we do seek input and feedback, it comes through the administrators, and is presented to Dr. Dolan and or the board.
I think there's a misapprehension, though, that somehow the Board of Education is picking the textbooks. I mean, we did have the new world history book, right, that you made available to us and was on the link, and that we approved, and obviously we approved the purchases. But, we're not educators. Well, maybe some of us are, but I'm not. And we don't actually pick out what, books that are going to be in the classroom, or what textbooks are going to be used, or what speakers. We
Right.
get a contract, we approve the contract, but it's all based upon the recommendations of the educators and the administrators. So I think there's a misapprehension of the role of the board in that selection process. And I guess the question is, like, I think it's more, the discussion is more, I think, generated by the more national discussion on CRT, some of the speakers, and some of the, the individual books available in the library, or in the classroom libraries. And I guess parents are looking to be more involved. But I do also think it's a misapprehension of what CRT is, which is a curriculum that some high schools, there was an article in the New York Times, I think around September or so, about a private school that had developed, that was actually teaching CRT. And I think when we say we don't teach CRT, that there's a misinterpretation that that doesn't mean that we don't teach perspective, right? And differing perspectives. So I don't know how to clarify that in in the minds of people. And since I personally am not picking what the students are reading, I would have no idea what they're reading in middle school, right? How would I? And that really, quite frankly, isn't my role. So how do we inform the parents and engage them? Because I don't want people to be angry and feel that we are not listening to them, when indeed that is not our role specifically.
A couple of thoughts. The first one, apropos of what I said earlier tonight, we received phone calls from people asking, can we meet with you? Can we talk to you? And I know Chris and I have had some really good meetings with parents who've come up to say, I'd like to talk about the curriculum. I'd like to learn more about the process. Or even, I'd like to express a concern. And we've had some very good conversations. The second thing, and I'll turn it back over to Chris now, is these committees, we got off to a late start this year, and we blamed enough on COVID tonight. I won't blame that on COVID, but we did get off to a late start tonight. But I'll ask Chris to remind everybody, for the purpose of this meeting and so that the community can hear, how do people get involved in those committees? When are they posted, and what's the process to become a member?
If they can join during the year.
So we did ask the community to fill out a form for some of these strategic planning committees this year, and we gave folks their first choice because we're trying to have balance on committees. Community members, parents can still join. They can email me, and I'll work with Dr. Dolan and some of the other co-facilitators of the committees to re-advertise those. We had the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting yesterday, and I do think, maybe there was an expectation that certain things like that you mentioned would be discussed, and it was a little more pedantic and a little more technical about student portfolios and perhaps, not the most exciting discussion. So the focus does change every year, but they are open discussions. And so that is important. And I do want to echo what Dr. Dolan said, and that is we have had a lot of conversations, our curriculum directors too, about concerns that have come up. And when we always listen, we learn from those conversations. I think, one of the most important things that we're working on is to model for our students what you mentioned, multiple perspectives, open-minded conversations, civility in the classroom, really teaching our students how to listen to each other, even if they don't agree with each other. We've had such a rich tradition of Socratic discussion here. At one point, we had a universal training of most of our teachers. So we're trying to bring that back and create some of those opportunities so that all students and from all perspectives feel safe, feel respected, and feel like they have a voice and they can share that voice.
Right, but again, this also circles back to students and how the students interpret what they're reading and what they're doing. And I think it's really important that we continue to engage students and survey them in a personal manner about what they took out of what they read, right? And we did, like when my kids were in school, there were Socratic seminars and Socratic circles, and all the teachers were trained in that. And I think the concerns for some of the parents were that some of the materials they felt were too sophisticated or advanced or complex or mature for their particular student. And so that's where I think, notice and parent involvement is key. And it's been difficult for us to involve the parents in this COVID type world. And I think as we move forward, that we really have to get the parents back in the buildings and more involved so they can see. But I also think we've always valued student voice. And I think at times like this one, we're introducing different types of text and maybe a different way of teaching history than the way I certainly learned it, a million years ago in Catholic school, is vastly different than the way we are instructing our students. And I loved in your narrative that you talked about the parent universities, which again we have not had as much because of COVID. I think I like the idea of expanding those parent universities into science and social studies, because I think the more that we engage the parents, the more they understand the mission, and they're not getting, they're not relying upon what was said at the bus stop or, that type of information. And the more we do that, I think the less discontent will be. And if we find there's an issue, that we can resolve that issue rather than leaving people feeling angry, isolated, and unheard. I think there's a significant portion of this community that feels like they've had these discussions with teachers and with administrators and with the Board of Education, and we are not hearing them. And I would like, I think it's our role to close that gap, right? We don't want to have that gap between us and the community. And the only way we can do that is to engage them. And now that the numbers are going down, I really would encourage greater communication with the parents. And listen, I know you've got a lot on your plate. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but and you're going to have a lot more soon. But I think that's something that we talk about goals every year. And one of our goals is community engagement. And I think one of the ways to achieve the goal of community engagement is to engage our parents and have them understand what is actually being taught in the classroom and how that information is being delivered.
Can I add? I thought that was all so well said. And the extent to which parents start coming back into the buildings, I think it's going to make a huge difference. But I also want to point out, too, that we do have, actual written policies surrounding a lot of these issues and concerns. And it's important that we refer to them and use them. We have a policy on almost everything.
It's true. I think one of the words that was used was, how do we bring, they're all synonyms for the engagement piece. Marianne did specifically use the word engagement, which is what we were talking about, and is an explicit goal of ours for this year to bring people in. The more that people are brought in, can see what we're actually doing, the more it demystifies the process, and the more people realize that the things that are external to this conversation, whether it's in the media or the social media or wherever else it is that they're hearing it, isn't exactly what's happening here, and that it's real people and real situations. And I think that brings us together as a community and does help reduce some of that hostility and feeling of being externalized that I do think Marianne aptly put. So yes, I think we're in agreement. I do want to make sure we don't go too far into a discussion of this right now, so I think I'll probably ask for other old business on this. I'm sorry, other old business, period. Lisa, your light was on. Did I preempt you?
I think it's new business, but.
Okay, is there any other old business before we?
Well, yes, I'd like to reiterate our request that old/new business be an official agenda item.
That's old business, so I think you'll have to wait until next time to bring that up. Okay, Lisa, we're moving into the new.
Okay. I'm going to refer again to the Viking View because our students are so persuasive. There was another cover article about the traffic on Glen Cove Avenue in the morning, and it sounds worse than I realized it was because I'm never driving down there in the morning, thank goodness. And the author of the article actually gave some suggestions that I thought were interesting about maybe opening up some other entrances to the school, to the middle school, the high school, or starting one school a few minutes later than the other. And I was just wondering if there is a chance we could try one of these suggestions.
So the article was in the, I was actually interviewed for that article back in October, and I did bring it to the board's attention on October the 29th in my boardgram. My answers in the article were somewhat simplistic because the young lady who did a great job of interviewing me was asking for easy solutions. I offered some, like more students riding the bus, which would absolutely help to alleviate, but I know nobody wants to ride on a $150,000 vehicle. Nobody wants to ride on those. No matter how attractive we make them, they probably won't want to ride on an electric vehicle either to the same degree. Certainly, the geography of having two schools with their entrances exactly opposite one another is problematic, and it does. The policemen who are out there constantly point that out to me. Wow, this is really tough. Yeah, none of us can be blamed for that. Altering starting times is probably the one that's most within the board's purview and the administration's purview. And I don't know if there's been conversations about that before, but we could have those again. Those start times are such a difficult topic, though, because so much of it is driven by after-school activities, daylight savings time. You want to be here in the daylight, not in the dark. And the final proposal that was mentioned in there was the idea of, and I hope someone will help me if I get the street wrong, there is a gate on Todd Drive, and it has been suggested that perhaps by opening up the gate on Todd Drive, it would create a source of egress. Cars could pull into the high school, keep going straight, make the right-hand turn, and go out through Todd Drive. So I did look at the map on that, and that would mean that everyone would then have to exit out on another street that empties onto, guess where? Glen Cove Road, about 100 yards away from the light.
You will make your neighbors very unhappy if you do that.
Haven't even broached that subject because, okay, as I understand it, that gate is closed.
And then making a left onto Glen Cove Ave into the traffic where the Kassam T is. Oy.
So Lisa, I don't want to tell you there's no solution, but we have thrown a lot of things around. I thought the student was, it was great talking to the student about it and hearing her perspective. But I'm pleased to hear that you're not on Glen Cove Road at 8 o'clock in the morning because I don't know is we can bear a lot more traffic. It is tough, all kidding aside. It is tough. It is difficult. I'm hoping that perhaps the traffic study that we're doing now as we look at where the sign is going to go at some point in the future might reveal something.
Yeah, it's called like $2 million, $1 million to $2 million to fix the front entrance problem, because we looked at that as we looked at
study. When was that? 2016 or something, or older?
Oh, it was more recent than that.
Well,
originally it was then. Then we did the follow up that involved the Kassam route exit.
Yeah, but the original one was much more comprehensive.
It was older than that. My kids were in elementary school when we first did the traffic study, and I actually, because I'm so freaking old, was on that committee.
That study is still interesting. It's still an interesting idea.
Right, and there were all the ideas involved really changing the exit and the entrance on the middle school. And what I was told by people who were here ahead of me was originally when the middle school was built, they did not put a cafeteria in the middle school for a full service cafeteria. And the hot lunches were brought from the high school over to the middle school cafeteria, which is, which is one of the reasons why it was that. That's complete hearsay from, people who were here ahead of me, but that was the thinking. And the reason why the students want Todd Drive opened up, having had 2 student drivers, if you get here late, which my students perpetually were, and you have to park all the way down there, which they call Guam. It can take you a half hour to get out of the parking lot if you park down there. So their thought is if you're parked down on that lower end by the athletic fields, if you could exit out that gate by Todd Drive, then you don't get caught in the bus traffic coming in. You have another route that doesn't involve that. However, the gate is there because the people on Todd Drive were angry that people were using that exit. Right, because because they're having a hard time, especially in the morning, getting out of. I mean, how many times have you been stuck in traffic and someone won't let anyone out on Todd Drive? It's crazy, but that's my history lesson for tonight.
Well, maybe everyone will think riding the electric buses is so cool that
That
everyone will.
they'll do it. The original traffic study, which is really old, did have a tremendous amount of detail about like some changes, some of which are all expensive, right? Like anytime you're talking about like changing any part of a road or a curb, just say $1 million to yourself. But it had some other stuff about where maybe turn should be right turn only, et cetera. It had some smaller
signage
stuff,
about
kind
the
of,
stop sign.
Signage and stuff, sort of some smaller things in it that I still think we could capitalize on.
Right, but and one of the areas of focus was not just that, but I don't know if any of you have ever picked up or dropped off a student at Glen Head School. Oh, nightmare.
Yeah, it's a lollipop driveway.
Yeah, and the raining, and there's not faculty parking, so everyone parks there. I think the conclusion I reach is that we had to, get the town to do eminent domain on there and condemn all those properties and take them over and donate it to school to solve the traffic problem with that. And
There's
it's
a super
quite
fun site under that.
yeah.
Okay. So I think that the conclusion here, Lisa, it's a very good point. Maybe if, at the very least, the trustees could be somehow the old traffic study could be made more easily accessible.
Down. Yep. We're going to look for the old traffic study. We'll take a look at it. I will distribute it to the board members who maybe have
I'm
not seen
sure I
it
have it.
before.
I read it most weeks.
That was before 2010, I think.
John Hall is listening, and I'm sure by tomorrow morning you all have it.
You are going to
From
love
Dunn
it. It is
Engineering.
gripping. It's gripping. You are going to love it. I promise.
I'm looking forward to that.
I think Mikey may have been.
But I will ask at this point if there's other new business.
Yeah.
Can I just, it's like a follow-up that's a little bit different.
Sure.
I don't know if the school can do anything about the walkway that has been closed forever on Glen Cove Avenue on the same side.
I was like, we couldn't do anything about the wall collapsing under it, and then when they fixed it and they closed it, I'm not sure we can either.
Which walkway? The one with the stones that were lost?
Yeah.
So that is slated to be done by the County of Nassau. I will not add any editorial about that other than to say they broke it up into a multi-stage process where they were doing that temporary fix and they're going to take down the temporary fix and build a more permanent fix. So it'll be a while, but they're at least on it. And this, of course, a county road. I know this through non-school board knowledge.
I mean, and so the district can't put any pressure on that because I do think, obviously it's a safety hazard, right? Because the children on that side can't walk. They got to cross that busy street, or parents have to drive them, which complicates the traffic issue.
Peter did look into that, Andrea, just so you know.
Yeah.
He did reach out to different people. And I know that if you look at the civic group, George Pombar, when he does his updates, you will see George updating you on what's being done, in particular on that wall and that walkway.
That said, just as a follow to both of these, more piggybacking, in speaking with George, there may be an opportunity to work with the civics and advocate for the long desired sidewalk from the four corners to the school. I think that is an opportunity. There potentially could be some of the infrastructure funds that could be available. And if we work together, let's at least see if we can access that, because that would facilitate more walkers. And that is the ultimate solution, other than the buses, to the traffic problem. I'm
So-
sorry, I think you're.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
We'd also need that sidewalk because the kids walk down to the deli to get lunch.
Yeah.
High school kids.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Andrea. Sarah?
I was going to say the issue of the actual cost per student, I don't think is something we can do internally. Like the way different districts post their budgets and the categories involved. But I do think it's something that ought to be doable. But I think it would take the state changing how we report data to them, and hence that gets us to lack potentially, like changing how that's done.
I was going to respond before because you're right. We could develop our own metric. We could look at our budget and pull out things like St. Christopher's, and we could come up with what we believe to be our per student cost. But unfortunately, if other districts don't do that, honestly, that would be kind of a phony number because it would only be based on what we think should be included in there. So perhaps in LAC, this is not the only place that has a concern about that, and I've heard conversations about per pupil expenditures and that cost comparison. So there might be a place for that at LAC where we could ask state ed to, through the legislature, ask state ed to review that and see whether or not there's a more realistic formula that takes out some of the kind of extraneous costs that Dave started to itemize before.
And we don't get the worst impact of it at all. I think it's the district with charters in it, right? Like that money flows through the district and just crazy distortions occur in that situation. So it's something
And
the
also,
state
the
needs.
smallest of districts have an issue with it also because of economy of scale. There are certain things you have to provide no matter what, no matter how many kids you have.
Yep.
So the smaller you get, the more questionable that statistic is. And the larger you get, the more it's homogenized, if you will.
There's also issues, I think, in terms of, when you're talking about elementary foreign language. So you'll find districts that have dual enrollment programs, but the reason why they have dual enrollment programs is because when you have a certain number of students that English is not their first language, you have to instruct them in their foreign language, and they get aid for that language instruction, which is why you would have Port Washington and Mineola have dual language enrollment, which obviously if your student can be enrolled in that program if they are not eligible, if they're not required to be in it. It's just my point was there are any number of factors that you would have to take into account, and some of the discrepancies in the cost per student are what we have chosen to do, like Mandarin and Spanish instruction in the elementary school, and some of them are required by law. So I think my point was if there's no, it may be simplistic way to measure it in the cost per student, but I don't know of there's not a better way was my point of doing a cost per student. And maybe the answer is not numerical. Maybe the answer is this is what we have chosen to do for students, and this is what we are required to do. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there for discussion, and maybe this is a bigger discussion for another night, not at 11 o'clock at night.
I will ask at that point, I think it's a good segue to other new business. So I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All right, ready to go? Aye. Thank you, everyone.